My name is Daniel, and today I'm going to tell you about the night God spoke words to me that would completely dismantle everything I thought I knew about control, planning, and trust. But before I continue, if this story resonates with you, please subscribe to this channel, share it with someone you love, and leave a comment below telling me about a time when worry consumed your thoughts. Your story matters, and I'd love to hear it. I need you to understand something about who I was before that night. I was the kind of person who had spreadsheets for everything. My life was organized in color-coded calendars, backup plans for backup plans, and contingency strategies that covered every possible scenario. At 32 years old, I was a financial analyst at a mid-size firm in Chicago, and my entire identity was wrapped up in being the guy who could predict outcomes, manage risk, and never be caught off guard. My apartment reflected this obsession. Everything had its place. My clothes were arranged by color and season. My kitchen pantry was labeled with expiration dates facing forward. Even my gym routine was planned 6 months in advance, with progressive overload calculations tracked in a dedicated app. People at work called me the machine because I never seemed rattled, never unprepared, never uncertain. But what they didn't see was the cost of all that control. What they didn't see were the nights I'd lie awake at 3 in the morning, my mind racing through tomorrow's meetings, next week's presentations, next month's performance reviews. They didn't see how I'd check my phone 40 times before bed, making sure every email was answered, every task updated, every potential fire extinguished before it could start. They didn't see the knot that lived permanently in my chest, the tension that never quite released from my shoulders, the way my jaw ached from clenching it during the day. My girlfriend Sarah had started to notice. We'd been together for 2 years, and lately she'd been pulling away. Not dramatically, not with fights or accusations, just a quiet distancing that scared me more than any confrontation would have. "You're not present, Daniel," she'd said one evening over dinner I'd barely tasted because I was mentally rehearsing a client pitch. "You're physically here, but your mind is always somewhere in the future, trying to control things that haven't even happened yet." I'd wanted to defend myself, to explain that my planning was what made me successful, what kept us financially secure, what ensured our future would be stable. But the look in her eyes stopped me. It wasn't anger, it was sadness, and maybe something worse, resignation. The truth I couldn't admit to her or to myself was that the more I tried to control, the more anxious I became. Every plan I made generated 3 more what-if scenarios. Every problem I solved revealed 2 potential future problems. It was like trying to hold water in my hands. The tighter I squeezed, the more it slipped through my fingers. The Sunday it happened started like any other. I'd been at my desk since 6 a.m., updating my financial projections for the next quarter. I had spreadsheets predicting my career trajectory for the next 10 years, investment portfolios rebalanced monthly, and a 5-year plan that covered everything from potential promotions to the exact year I'd proposed to Sarah. But that afternoon, something broke. I was working on a particularly complex scenario, a potential restructuring at work that might affect my position, when I suddenly couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, like someone had wrapped steel bands around my ribs and was pulling them tighter and tighter. My vision tunneled. My hands started shaking so badly I couldn't type. Panic attack. I'd read about them, analyzed the symptoms, even had a contingency plan for managing stress. But reading about something and experiencing it are completely different things. I stumbled to my bedroom and collapsed on the floor, my back against the bed, trying to remember the breathing exercises I'd researched. But my mind wouldn't cooperate. It was racing through every possible catastrophe, losing my job, financial ruin, Sarah leaving, my parents' disappointment, homelessness, failure, failure, failure. That's when I did something I hadn't done since I was a child. I prayed. Not the casual, "God bless this food" prayers I'd mumbled at family dinners. Not the desperate bargaining prayers I'd whispered before big exams in college. This was raw, broken, desperate. "God, I can't do this anymore," I gasped between shallow breaths. I can't control everything. I can't see the future. I can't keep all the pieces together. I'm drowning and I don't know how to stop. The room was silent, except for my ragged breathing. I didn't expect an answer. I drifted so far from any kind of faith that I wasn't even sure I believed anyone was listening. But then something happened that I still struggle to put into words. The panic didn't vanish. The tightness in my chest didn't magically release. But into the chaos of my racing thoughts came a voice, not audible, not like someone speaking in the room, but undeniably present, undeniably real, undeniably not my own thoughts. Your tomorrow will not be as you imagine. I've already taken care of it. 7 simple words that landed in my spirit like stones dropping into still water, creating ripples that would eventually touch every corner of my life. I stopped mid-breath. The voice wasn't loud, but it was clear. It wasn't harsh, but it was absolute, and it carried with it a knowing, a certainty that was completely foreign to my experience. Your tomorrow will not be as you imagine. My first reaction was fear. If tomorrow wouldn't be as I imagined, that meant all my planning was pointless. It meant uncertainty. It meant chaos. Everything I'd built my identity on was being challenged by these words. But then the second part settled in. I have already taken care of it. Past tense. Already taken care of. Not I will take care of it or trust me to handle it, but already done. Already in place. Already secured. I don't know how long I sat there on that bedroom floor. It might have been 10 minutes. It might have been an hour, but something fundamental had shifted. The panic attack subsided not because I'd controlled it or managed it or reasoned my way out of it, but because something greater than my anxiety had spoken directly into it. I pulled myself up to sit on the edge of the bed, my legs still shaky, my heart still pounding but slower now, more regular. My laptop sat on my desk across the room, the screen still glowing with my spreadsheets and projections and carefully constructed plans. And for the first time in years, I felt the weight of what all that planning had cost me. Not just sleep or peace of mind, but something deeper. I'd been trying to be God in my own life, orchestrating every detail, managing every outcome, trusting nothing and no one but my own ability to predict and control. Sarah had been right. I wasn't present. I couldn't be present because I was always living in a future I was desperately trying to control, blind to the reality that I'd never controlled any of it in the first place. I stood up slowly, walked to my desk, and for the first time in years, I closed my laptop without saving, without checking one more email, without reviewing one more scenario. That night, I barely slept, but it wasn't the anxious insomnia I'd known for years. It was different. I was wrestling with something, wrestling with the implications of those words, wrestling with what it would mean to actually trust that tomorrow was already taken care of, wrestling with the terrifying possibility that I'd been wrong about everything. When morning came, I knew something had started that night, something I didn't fully understand yet, but something I couldn't ignore. God had spoken, and his words had cracked open the foundation of everything I'd built my life on. What I didn't know yet was that this was only the beginning. The morning after God spoke those words to me, I woke up at 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes before my alarm, which was typical. What wasn't typical was that I didn't immediately reach for my phone to check emails or review my daily schedule. Instead, I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying those 7 words over and over in my mind. Your tomorrow will not be as you imagine. I have already taken care of it. The rational part of my brain, the part that had dominated my entire adult life, was already trying to explain it away. Stress-induced auditory hallucination. My subconscious mind telling me what I needed to hear. A psychological break brought on by the panic attack. But there was another part of me, a part I'd ignored for so long I'd almost forgotten it existed, that knew with absolute certainty that what happened last night was real. I got up and went through my morning routine on autopilot. Shower, coffee, The usual breakfast of oatmeal with precisely measured portions of berries and nuts, but everything felt different, like I was moving through a world that had subtly shifted overnight. The colors seemed sharper, the sounds clearer. Even the taste of my coffee was more vivid, more present. Sarah was still asleep in the bedroom. We'd stopped sharing the bed regularly about 3 months ago, another casualty of my obsessive planning. I'd tell her I was staying up late to finish work, but the truth was, I couldn't sleep next to another person when my mind was racing through tomorrow's problems. The few times I'd tried recently, my restlessness kept her awake, and the guilt of disturbing her sleep just added another layer to my anxiety. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop in front of me, the cursor blinking on my main planning spreadsheet. For 5 years, this document had been my Bible. Every morning started here, reviewing goals, adjusting projections, adding new contingencies. I'd open it before I'd even fully woken up, and I'd close it as the last thing before bed. But this morning, I couldn't make myself click on it. Instead, I found myself opening a blank document and typing out those 7 words. Your tomorrow will not be as you imagine. I have already taken care of it. I stared at them for a long time, and then I started writing. Not planning, not strategizing, just writing. Questions, mostly. What did it mean that tomorrow wouldn't be as I imagined? Which tomorrow? Literally tomorrow, or the future in general? And what did already taken care of actually mean? Taken care of how? By whom? What was I supposed to do with this information? The more I wrote, the more I realized how little control I actually had over anything. I'd spent years creating the illusion of control through planning, but plans don't control reality. They just help us feel less helpless in the face of it. Every spreadsheet, every projection, every contingency plan was really just a talisman I was using to ward off the terror of uncertainty. And God, if that's really who had spoken to me, was telling me that all of it was unnecessary, that tomorrow was already handled, that I could stop. But how do you stop when controlling has been your entire identity? I was still sitting there staring at my screen when Sarah emerged from the bedroom. She was wearing one of my old college t-shirts and her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked tired, and I realized with a pang of guilt that she'd probably been tired for months, and I'd been too preoccupied to notice. "You're up early," she said, pouring herself coffee. "Even for you." "And couldn't sleep," I said, which was true, even if it wasn't the whole truth. She sat down across from me, cradling her mug in both hands. For a moment we just sat in silence, not the comfortable silence of people who know each other well, but the awkward silence of two people who've forgotten how to connect. "Daniel," she finally said, her voice soft but firm, "we need to talk." Those 4 words. Every person in a relationship knows what those 4 words mean. My chest tightened, and my mind immediately started racing through scenarios, calculating probabilities, planning responses. But then I remembered, your tomorrow will not be as you imagine. "Okay," I said, closing my laptop, something the old me would never have done in the middle of a conversation. "I'm listening." She looked surprised by that, which hurt more than I wanted to admit. "I love you," she said, and the past tense of that verb hit me before I realized she'd said it in present tense. "But I can't keep living like this. You're not here, Daniel. Even when you're physically in the room, you're somewhere else. In next week, next month, next year. I feel like I'm in a relationship with a ghost." I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to explain that my planning was for us, for our future, for the life we were going to build together. But the words died in my throat because I knew she was right. "I've been thinking about moving out," she continued, her voice cracking slightly. "Just for a while. To give us both space to figure out what we really want." The old Daniel would have panicked, would have started calculating financial implications, social embarrassment, timeline for reconciliation, probability of permanent separation, would have created a spreadsheet to manage the crisis, but something different happened. "I heard from God last night," I said. The words came out before I'd consciously decided to say them. Sarah's eyes widened, not with belief, but with concern. The kind of concern you have when someone you love says something that makes you worry about their mental state. I know how that sounds, I continued. Trust me, the analytical part of my brain is screaming at me right now, but something happened last night during a panic attack. I heard, or felt, or knew. I don't even know how to describe it. But God told me that my tomorrow won't be as I imagine it, and that He's already taken care of it. Sarah set down her coffee mug carefully. Daniel, are you okay? Maybe you should talk to someone, a therapist or... I probably should talk to a therapist, I interrupted. Not because I'm having a breakdown, but because I need help figuring out how to stop trying to control everything. You're right about me not being present. You're right about all of it. And I don't know how to change, but I know I need to. She was quiet for a long moment, studying my face like she was trying to determine if I was serious. What does that even mean? She finally asked. God told you tomorrow is taken care of? Taken care of how? I don't know, I admitted, and saying those 3 words felt both terrifying and liberating. I have no idea, but I think that's the point. I think I'm supposed to not know. I think I'm supposed to trust instead of plan. That doesn't sound like you at all. I know, and maybe that's the problem. Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. It was the first time she'd voluntarily touched me in weeks, and I felt the weight of how much distance had grown between us. I don't know what to do with this, she said honestly. Part of me wants to believe that something really happened to you last night. But part of me is scared that this is just another thing you're going to try to control. Spirituality as the new optimization strategy. Her words stung because they were perceptive. She knew me well enough to see how easily I could turn even faith into another system to manage and perfect. I don't have any answers, I said. I just know that last night, for the first time in years, I felt peace. Real peace. Not the false peace of having every detail planned out, but actual peace. And I want more of that. I need more of that. She squeezed my hand. I need to see it, Daniel. Not just hear about it. I need to see you actually change, actually let go, actually be present, because I can't keep living in the shadow of your anxiety about the future. I know, I said, and I don't blame you if you need space. I don't blame you for any of this. We sat there for a while longer, holding hands across the kitchen table, both of us uncertain about what came next. Eventually, Sarah got up to get ready for work, and I was left alone with my thoughts and my closed laptop. I thought about opening my planning spreadsheet. I thought about my work calendar, my project timelines, my 5-year plan. All of it was still there, still demanding attention, still pulling at me with the familiar urgency of control. Instead, I opened that blank document again and wrote, God, if you're really there, if you really spoke to me, I need help. I don't know how to trust. I don't know how to let go. I don't even know if I believe in you, or if I'm just desperate enough to believe in anything that promises relief from this anxiety. But if you're real, show me, teach me, help me. It wasn't much of a prayer. It certainly wasn't eloquent, but it was honest, and that was more than I'd been with God or with myself in a very long time. I hit save on the document, and then, in a moment of impulse that felt both reckless and right, I opened my main planning spreadsheet, the one I'd spent 5 years building, the one that mapped out every aspect of my life for the next decade, and I moved it to the trash. My hand hovered over the mouse. Every instinct screamed at me to undo it, to restore the file, to not destroy years of careful planning. But then I remembered those words. Your tomorrow will not be as you imagine. I have already taken care of it. I emptied the trash, and then I closed my laptop and sat in the sudden, terrifying silence of not knowing what came next. The old Daniel was dying. I could feel it happening, feel the structures I'd built my entire identity on beginning to crack and crumble. It was painful and frightening and disorienting, but underneath the fear there was something else, something small but growing, something that felt like the first rays of sunlight breaking through after a long, dark night. Hope. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. For the first time in my adult life, I had no plan, no projection, no carefully constructed contingency. I was standing at the edge of the unknown, with nothing but 7 words spoken into my panic. Your tomorrow will not be as you imagine. I have already taken care of it. And somehow, impossibly, that was starting to be enough. The commute to work that Monday morning felt like traveling through a foreign country. I'd taken the same train, at the same time, on the same route for 4 years. I knew every stop, every announcement, every face of the regular commuters who boarded at the same stations. But that morning, it all felt unfamiliar, as if deleting that spreadsheet had somehow altered the fabric of my reality. I kept reaching for my phone to review my daily schedule, my meeting notes, my project timelines. Each time my hand moved toward my pocket, I'd stop myself and instead just sit there watching the city blur past the window. The anxiety was there, a constant hum in my chest. But it was different now. Before, the anxiety had felt like a warning system I needed to obey. Now, it felt more like background noise I could acknowledge without being controlled by it. The office was on the 32nd floor of a glass and steel tower in downtown Chicago. I'd always loved the view from up there, the sense of being above it all, seeing the patterns and flows of the city from a distance. Now I wondered if that's what I'd been doing with my entire life, trying to stay above it all, observing and controlling from a distance rather than actually living in it. My desk was exactly as I'd left it Friday afternoon. 2 monitors displaying multiple spreadsheets, a color-coded physical planner open to today's date, 3 different notebooks for different types of tasks, and a coffee mug with a mathematical equation printed on it that Sarah had given me for my birthday 2 years ago. She'd thought it was funny. I'd thought it was perfect. Now it just felt sad. "You're here early," said Marcus, my cubicle neighbor, appearing at the partition with his own coffee. "Wait, no, you're not. You're always here early, never mind." Marcus was the opposite of me in almost every way. Disorganized, spontaneous, prone to making decisions based on gut feelings rather than data. We'd become friends despite our differences, or maybe because of them. He was one of the few people at work who could make me laugh. "You look weird," he said, studying my face. "Did you get a haircut?" "No." "Lose weight?" "No." "Win the lottery?" "Marcus, I look exactly the same as I did Friday." "Nah, man. Something's different. You've got this, I don't know, shell-shocked look, like you just witnessed something that broke your brain." He was more perceptive than I gave him credit for. "I had a panic attack yesterday," I heard myself say. I hadn't planned to tell anyone, certainly not Marcus, certainly not at work. But the words came out anyway. His expression shifted immediately from playful to concerned. "Seriously, are you okay? Did you see a doctor?" "I'm okay, I think. I don't know." I sat down at my desk, and Marcus pulled up a chair, his coffee forgotten. Something happened during it, something I can't really explain. Try me. So I told him. Not everything. I didn't mention the spreadsheet I'd deleted or the conversation with Sarah, but I told him about the panic attack and the voice and those 7 words. As I spoke, I watched his face for signs of judgment or dismissal, but he just listened, nodding occasionally. "Wow," he said when I finished. "That's heavy. You think I'm crazy?" "No, man. I think you're stressed as hell and something finally cracked. But crazy?" He shook his head. "I grew up Pentecostal. My grandmother used to say God spoke to her all the time. She was the sanest person I ever knew. Did God actually speak to her? Who knows? But she believed it, and it made her life better, not worse. She was happy, peaceful, generous. If that's crazy, sign me up." Before I could respond, my desk phone rang. The caller ID showed it was Robert Chen, my direct supervisor. My stomach clenched automatically. Robert never called unless there was a problem. "Daniel, can you come to my office?" His voice was neutral, which somehow made it worse. I looked at Marcus, who raised his eyebrows. "Good luck," he mouthed. Robert's office was a glass-walled cube that gave the illusion of transparency while actually being completely soundproof. He was sitting behind his desk, his expression unreadable, and there was someone else in the room. Karen from HR. My mind immediately started calculating scenarios, layoffs, performance issues, the restructuring I'd been modeling in my now-deleted spreadsheet. But then I remembered, your tomorrow will not be as you imagine. "Sit down, Daniel," Robert said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I sat. Karen smiled at me, one of those professional smiles that could mean anything. "We've been reviewing the team structure," Robert began, "and we've identified some opportunities for growth and development." This was corporate speak. I'd learned to decode it years ago. Opportunities for growth could mean promotion or termination, depending on the context. "As you know, Jennifer in the senior analyst position is leaving next month to move to Seattle," he continued. "We've been discussing who should move into that role." My heart rate picked up. The senior analyst position was 2 levels above mine, a jump that would normally take years to achieve. It was the kind of promotion I'd meticulously planned for, scheduled in my projections for 3 years from now after I'd completed specific certifications and accumulated the right experience. "We'd like to offer you the position." The words didn't immediately register. When they did, my first instinct was to pull out my phone and check my timeline, to see how this fit into my projections, to calculate whether this was too early or if I'd need to adjust my plans. But my phone stayed in my pocket. "I know this is ahead of schedule," Robert said, misreading my silence as hesitation. "And it's a significant increase in responsibility. The role would involve managing a team of 4 analysts, interfacing directly with clients, and taking lead on our most complex projects. It's also a 40% salary increase, and eligible for quarterly bonuses." Karen leaned forward. "We'd need your answer by Wednesday. The transition would start immediately, and Jennifer has agreed to stay on for 2 additional weeks to help with knowledge transfer." I should have been elated. This was everything I'd been working toward, everything I'd planned for, except it was happening 3 years too early, in a way I hadn't predicted, at a moment when I'd just deleted every plan I'd ever made. "Your tomorrow will not be as you imagine. I have already taken care of it." "Can I ask why me?" I said finally. "There are other analysts with more seniority." Robert smiled. "Because you're the best at what you do, Daniel. Your analysis is always thorough, your projections are accurate, and clients trust you. You think 10 steps ahead. That's exactly what we need in this role. 10 steps ahead. My entire identity, my entire problem." "I need to think about it," I said, and both Robert and Karen looked surprised. "In the corporate world, you don't think about promotions. You accept them immediately with gratitude and enthusiasm." "Of course," Karen said smoothly. "Take until Wednesday, but Daniel, opportunities like this don't come around often." I walked back to my desk in a daze. Marcus was waiting, practically vibrating with curiosity. "Well, they offered me Jennifer's position." "That's amazing! That's huge! Wait, why do you look like someone just offered you a prison sentence?" I sat down heavily. "Because I don't know if I should take it." "Are you insane? Do you know how many people would kill for that job?" "I know. I've been planning for it for years. But that's the problem, Marcus. Everything I've been planning, all of it, it's built on the foundation of me being the guy who thinks 10 steps ahead, who controls every variable, who never gets caught off guard. And that guy is killing me. That guy had a panic attack on his bedroom floor yesterday." Marcus pulled his chair closer, lowering his voice. "So what are you saying? You're going to turn down a massive promotion because of some kind of spiritual crisis?" "I don't know what I'm going to do. That's the whole point. For the first time in my life, I don't have a plan." He leaned back, studying me. "You know what my grandmother used to say? She said when God moves in your life, he doesn't usually rearrange the furniture gently. He flips the whole house upside down, makes you question everything you thought you knew." Your grandmother sounds intense. She was. She also used to say that when God gives you a choice, the right answer is usually the one that scares you more. I thought about that. Taking the promotion didn't scare me. I'd been preparing for it for years. What scared me was turning it down, walking away from everything I'd worked toward, admitting that maybe success as I'd defined it wasn't actually what I needed. The rest of the day was a blur. I went through the motions of my work, but my mind was elsewhere, caught between two versions of my future. In one version, I took the promotion and became even more successful, even more in control, even more consumed by planning and managing and predicting. In the other version, well, I had no idea what the other version looked like, and that was the point. By the time I left the office, my head was pounding. The train ride home was crowded, forcing me to stand pressed against other commuters, unable to check my phone or distract myself. I was left with just my thoughts and the rhythmic clacking of the train on the tracks. When I got home, Sarah was already there, sitting on the couch with her laptop. She looked up when I entered, and I could see the question in her eyes. Had I meant what I said this morning, or was it just panic talking? "They offered me a promotion today," I said, setting down my bag. Her face lit up. "Daniel, that's wonderful. Which position?" "Senior analyst, Jennifer's role." "But that's huge. That's years ahead of schedule." "I know." She waited for more, and when I didn't continue, her expression shifted. "You don't seem excited." "I don't know if I should take it." She closed her laptop slowly. "What do you mean you don't know if you should take it? This is what you've been working toward." "That's the problem, Sarah. It's what the old me was working toward. The me who thought he could control everything if he just planned hard enough. The me who was having panic attacks and losing you because I couldn't stop living in the future." She stood up, crossing to where I stood in the doorway. "So what does the new you want?" "I have no idea, and that terrifies me. But maybe that's okay. Maybe not knowing is the point. You have to decide by Wednesday." "Yes." She took my hands in hers. "Then let's not decide anything tonight. Let's just be here now, together. No planning, no projecting, just this moment." It was such a simple suggestion, but it felt revolutionary. We ordered takeout, something we never did on weekdays because it didn't fit the meal plan. We ate on the couch, something I'd always said we shouldn't do because it was bad for digestion. We watched a movie without me checking my phone once, something that hadn't happened in years. And when the movie ended and we sat in the quiet apartment, Sarah's head on my shoulder, I felt something I hadn't felt in so long I'd almost forgotten what it was called. Peace. Not the false peace of having everything planned and controlled. Real peace. The peace of being present in a moment, connected to another person, open to whatever came next. "Your tomorrow will not be as you imagine," Sarah said softly, and I realized I'd spoken the words out loud without meaning to. "What do you think it means?" "I think it means I've been trying to write a story that's already been written," I said. "I think it means all my planning has been me trying to play God in my own life. And I think it means that whatever tomorrow brings, it's going to be different from anything I could have predicted or controlled." "Does that scare you?" "Terrifies me," I admitted. "But for the first time, I think I'm okay with being terrified." She lifted her head to look at me. "Who are you, and what have you done with Daniel?" I smiled, but there was truth behind her joke. Who was I without my planning, without my control, without my carefully constructed future? I didn't know yet, but I was beginning to suspect that finding out might be the most important thing I'd ever do. That night, lying in bed, in our bed together, for the first time in months, I prayed again. Not the desperate prayer of yesterday's panic, but something different. "God, I don't know if I'm supposed to take this job or walk away from it. I don't know if I'm supposed to stay in Chicago or move somewhere completely different. I don't know anything anymore, and that used to be my worst nightmare. But you said my tomorrow is already taken care of. So I'm asking you to show me, not through some dramatic sign or voice from heaven, though that would be nice, but just through the normal unfolding of life. Help me recognize your hand in it. Help me trust that you really have taken care of tomorrow, so I can stop trying to do your job." Next to me, Sarah's breathing had deepened into sleep. I lay there in the darkness, feeling the weight of the decision ahead of me, feeling the fear and the uncertainty and the strange, unexpected hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a better way to live than the one I'd been choosing. Somewhere in the city below, a siren wailed, a car horn honked. Life continued its messy, unpredictable, beautiful chaos. And for the first time in years, I wasn't trying to control it. I was just letting it be. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of heavy grey sky that makes Chicago feel like it's pressing down on you. I woke before the alarm again, but this time Sarah was awake too, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You were talking in your sleep," she said softly. What was I saying? Something about spreadsheets and diving off cliffs. She smiled slightly. "Very on brand for your current crisis." I sat up, running my hands through my hair. "I have until tomorrow to decide about the promotion." "I know. Every logical part of my brain is screaming at me to take it. I know that too. But something else, something I can't explain or quantify or put in a spreadsheet, is telling me that taking it would be a mistake. That it would be me choosing the old path, the old way, the old Daniel who was slowly dying inside." Sarah reached out and took my hand. "Can I tell you something I've never told you before?" I nodded, suddenly nervous. "When we first met, I fell in love with this guy, who was passionate and curious and fully present. Do you remember that conversation we had at the coffee shop on our second date? We talked for 4 hours about everything. Philosophy, dreams, fears, childhood memories. You were so alive, Daniel, so engaged with the moment." "I remember," I said quietly. "That guy disappeared gradually, so gradually that I didn't really notice it happening until he was mostly gone. He was replaced by someone who was always somewhere else, always planning, always calculating. And I've been grieving the loss of that first guy for 2 years now, wondering if he'd ever come back." Her words landed like physical blows, each one true, each one painful. "The last 2 days," she continued, "I've seen glimpses of him, little moments where you're actually here, actually present, actually engaged with life instead of trying to manage it from a distance. And I'm terrified that if you take this promotion, I'll lose those glimpses forever, that you'll dive even deeper into the person you've become, instead of finding your way back to the person you were." "That's not fair," I said, though my protest was weak. "This promotion is important. It's security for us, for our future. We don't need more security, Daniel. We need you, the real you, not the optimized, controlled, 10 steps ahead version. Just you, present and alive and willing to be surprised by life." She got up then, heading to the bathroom to get ready for work, leaving me sitting there with her words echoing in my mind. Was she right? Had I lost myself so completely in the pursuit of control that I'd forgotten who I was underneath all the planning? I thought about that guy she'd described, the one from the coffee shop, alive and engaged and present. I could barely remember him. He felt like a character from a story I'd read long ago, someone I used to know but had drifted away from over the years. After Sarah left for work, I did something I hadn't done in years. Instead of going straight to the office, I walked, not with any destination in mind, not as exercise with tracked steps and calculated calorie burn, just walking to walk. Moving through the city, watching people, feeling the cool morning air, being present in my body instead of trapped in my head. I found myself at Millennium Park, standing in front of Cloud Gate, the giant reflective bean sculpture that tourists loved and locals pretended to be too cool for. I'd passed it 1,000 times, but had never really looked at it. Now I stood there, staring at my distorted reflection in its mirrored surface. The sculpture warped everything, made me taller in some places, wider in others, fractured my image into pieces that didn't quite line up. It was disorienting and fascinating, and somehow deeply appropriate. This is how I'd been living, I realized, constantly seeing myself through a distorted lens, never quite able to see clearly who I actually was versus who I thought I should be. "It's strange, isn't it?" said a voice beside me. I turned to see an older man, maybe in his 70s, with white hair and kind eyes. "How it shows you yourself, but not quite yourself." "Yeah," I said. "It's disorienting. That's the point, I think. Makes you question what's real, what's the reflection, and what's the substance." He tilted his head, studying the sculpture. I come here sometimes when I need perspective. There's something about seeing yourself all twisted up and strange that reminds you not to take your own image too seriously. That's pretty philosophical for a Tuesday morning, I said. He laughed. I'm retired. Philosophy is pretty much all I have left. He extended his hand. Frank, Daniel. We stood there together in comfortable silence for a moment, two strangers sharing space in front of a giant metal bean. You look troubled, if you don't mind me saying, Frank said eventually. I recognize that look. Used to see it in the mirror every morning for about 5 years. What was troubling you? Oh, the usual midlife stuff. Realized I'd spent 30 years building a career I didn't actually care about, neglected my family in the process, woke up one day and didn't recognize the person I'd become. He said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. You? I hesitated. But there was something about this stranger's openness that invited honesty. I'm having a crisis about control, I said. I've spent my whole adult life trying to plan and manage every detail of my future, and it's been killing me slowly. Then a few days ago I had a panic attack, and I heard or felt or experienced something that told me tomorrow is already taken care of, that I don't need to control everything. Frank nodded slowly. And now you're trying to figure out what that means. Now I have to decide whether to take a major promotion that represents everything I've been working toward, or walk away from it and trust that there's something better, something I can't see yet. Ah, Frank said, the old fork in the road. Visible path versus invisible path. How do you choose? He was quiet for a long moment, watching our reflections shift and warp in the sculpture's surface. I can't tell you what to choose, but I can tell you about my fork in the road. I was 52, senior partner at a law firm, making more money than I knew what to do with, got offered managing partner, pinnacle of my career, everything I'd worked for. Did you take it? I did, and it was the biggest mistake of my life. He turned to look at me directly, not because the job was bad. It was fine, prestigious, powerful, well paid, but I took it for all the wrong reasons. I took it because it was the logical next step, because it fit the plan, because turning it down seemed crazy. And in doing so, I missed the opportunity to actually figure out what I wanted my life to be about. What happened? I spent 5 miserable years as managing partner. My marriage barely survived. I developed stress-related health problems. I was successful by every external measure and completely empty inside. Finally had a heart attack at 57, minor one fortunately, and it scared me enough to make a change. Retired early, spent a year just being still and figuring out who I was underneath all the career stuff. Started volunteering, reconnected with my wife, took up painting even though I'm terrible at it. And now I'm happy. Genuinely happy, for the first time in decades. I have less money, less prestige, less power, but I have peace, and I have myself back. A group of tourists approached, wanting photos, and Frank and I stepped aside to let them through. The thing about invisible paths, Frank said as we walked slowly away from the sculpture, is that you can't see where they lead. That's what makes them invisible. But visible paths, the ones that seem safe and predictable, they're often just well-worn ruts that other people have traveled. Following them might be easier, but that doesn't make them right. How do you know which path is which? You listen to the part of yourself that knows the difference between fear and wisdom. Fear says, don't take risks, stay safe, follow the plan. Wisdom says, this is wrong for you, even if you can't articulate why. They can feel similar, but they're completely different. We'd reached the edge of the park. Frank stopped and turned to me. I don't know you, Daniel. Don't know your situation beyond what you've told me. But I do know that when someone has the kind of experience you described, hearing from God, feeling that sense of peace, it's usually because something fundamental needs to change. And fundamental change doesn't happen by taking the next logical step on the path you've been walking. It happens by stepping off that path entirely. He pulled a business card from his wallet, plain white, just a phone number and an email address, no title or company. If you ever want to talk more, Feel free to reach out. Sometimes it helps to talk to someone who's been through it. I took the card, thanked him, and watched as he walked away, hands in his pockets, moving at the unhurried pace of someone who no longer had anywhere he needed to be. I stood there for a long time, turning his words over in my mind. Fear versus wisdom, visible paths versus invisible ones. The next logical step versus fundamental change. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Dude, where are you? Robert's looking for you." Reality crashed back in. I'd been gone for 2 hours without telling anyone. The old me would have been panicking, would have been composing elaborate apologies and excuses. The new me, whoever he was, just texted back, "Be there soon." When I got to the office, Robert was indeed looking for me, but not with anger, with concern. "Daniel, is everything okay? It's not like you to be late without calling." "I'm sorry. I needed some time to think about the promotion." His expression shifted to understanding. "That's actually why I wanted to talk to you. Can we sit down?" We went to his office, and this time it was just the two of us. "I want to be straight with you," Robert said, sitting on the edge of his desk rather than behind it. "When I offered you this position yesterday, I expected you to be excited. Your hesitation surprised me." "It surprised me too," I admitted. "Look, I've been in management long enough to recognize when someone is going through something. I don't know what it is, and you don't have to tell me, but I want you to know that this offer isn't conditional on you being excited about it. If you need more time, we can push the deadline. If you need to talk through concerns, I'm here." The kindness in his voice caught me off guard. I'd always seen Robert as my boss, as an authority figure to impress and satisfy. I'd never really seen him as a person. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Of course. Do you love your job?" He blinked, clearly not expecting that question. "That's a complicated question." "Is it?" He was quiet for a moment, considering. "Yes and no. I love parts of it. The strategy, the problem-solving, mentoring people like you. But if I'm being honest, there are days when I wonder what I'm doing with my life. Days when I think about all the time I've spent in meetings and conference calls and wonder if any of it actually matters. Then why do you stay? Because it's good work, it pays well, and I'm good at it. Because leaving would be complicated and scary and would require me to figure out what else I'd do with my life. Because sometimes it's easier to stay on the path you're on than to find a new one." He smiled ruefully. "Not exactly inspirational, is it?" "It's honest. Daniel, let me tell you something I've learned. Success, real success, isn't about titles or salary or climbing the ladder. It's about building a life you actually want to live, a life where you're present and engaged and not constantly running from yourself." He paused. "If taking this promotion feels wrong to you, trust that feeling. Don't do what I did and ignore your gut because the logical choice seems obvious. What did you do? Took a promotion I didn't want because it seemed crazy not to. Spent the next 3 years resenting every day of it until I finally admitted it was a mistake and stepped back down. Cost me professionally, but saved me personally. We talked for another 20 minutes, not about the promotion specifically, but about life. About choices, about the difference between success and fulfillment. When I left his office, I felt something I hadn't expected. Clarity, not about what to do, I still didn't know that, but about what the decision really was. It wasn't about whether to take a promotion or not. It was about whether I was going to keep trying to control my life through careful planning, or whether I was going to trust that voice, that presence that had spoken to me Sunday night. "Your tomorrow will not be as you imagine. I have already taken care of it." I sat at my desk and opened a new document. Not a spreadsheet, not a plan, just a blank page. And I started writing. God, I'm sitting here trying to make a decision using all the tools I've always used. Logic, data, probability, risk assessment. But those tools aren't working anymore because this isn't a logical decision. It's a trust decision, and I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to trust you when I can't see the outcome. I don't know how to step off the visible path onto the invisible one. I don't know how to be the person Sarah fell in love with instead of the person I've become. But I want to learn. I want to be different. I want to live instead of just planning to live. So if you're really there, if you really spoke to me, if tomorrow really is already taken care of, then show me. Give me the courage to choose trust over control. Give me the strength to walk away from what's safe toward what's true. Give me faith that the invisible path leads somewhere better than the visible one. I sat back and read what I'd written. It was a prayer, I realized, a real prayer, not trying to manipulate God or convince him of anything, just being honest about my fear and my desire and my need. My phone buzzed again. A text from Sarah. "How are you doing?" I typed back, "I think I know what I need to do. It scares me, but I think I know." 3 dots appeared as she typed her response. "Then do it. I'm with you either way." I looked around the office, at my 2 monitors, my color-coded planner, my precisely organized desk. I thought about the promotion waiting for my answer. I thought about the path I'd been walking my entire adult life, the path of control and planning and trying to predict every outcome. And then I thought about that moment on my bedroom floor, gasping for air, hearing those 7 words that had started to dismantle everything I'd built my identity on. I opened my email and started typing. "Robert, thank you for the opportunity and for our conversation this morning. After careful consideration, I've decided not to accept the senior analyst position." My hands were shaking. Every instinct screamed at me to stop, to delete the email, to take back what I was about to do, but I kept typing. This decision isn't about the role itself or confidence in my abilities. It's about recognizing that I need to make some fundamental changes in how I approach my life and work. Taking this promotion would be me continuing down a path that, while successful externally, has been destroying me internally. I need to step back, reassess, and figure out who I am beyond the planning and controlling. I hope you can understand, and I'm sorry if this causes difficulties with the transition. I'm committed to helping find and train my replacement in whatever way would be most helpful. I read it over 3 times. Then, before I could change my mind, I hit send. The email whooshed away, and I sat there in the sudden silence of having done something irreversible. My heart was pounding. My palms were sweating. Every logical part of my brain was in full panic mode, listing all the reasons this was a catastrophic mistake. But underneath the panic, there was something else. Something that felt like the ground beneath my feet, solid and real and true. Peace. Not the absence of fear, not certainty about what came next, but a deep, abiding sense that I'd just done something right, even if I couldn't explain why or predict where it would lead. My phone rang. "Robert." That was fast. "Daniel, I just got your email. I know it's probably not what you wanted to hear." Actually, he said, and I could hear something like respect in his voice. "It's exactly what I needed to hear. It takes courage to turn down what everyone else thinks you should want. Takes even more courage to admit you need to make changes. I'm proud of you. You're not upset?" "Upset? No. Concerned. Yes, but if you're making this choice for the right reasons, then it's the right choice. Do you need anything? Time off? Reduced responsibilities while you figure things out?" We talked through logistics, and when we hung up, I realized I was crying, not from sadness or regret, but from relief, from the overwhelming sense that I'd just stepped off a cliff and discovered that there was ground beneath me after all, ground I couldn't see but could trust. I texted Sarah. I turned down the promotion. Her response came immediately. "I love you. Come home early. Let's celebrate." "Celebrate what?" "You being brave enough to choose yourself over success." I looked at the clock. It was only 1 p.m. The old me would have stayed until at least 6, would have worked through lunch, would have made sure every task was completed and every email answered. The new me, whoever he was becoming, shut down his computer, grabbed his coat, and walked out of the office into the gray Chicago afternoon. And for the first time in years, I had absolutely no idea what came next. And that was okay. The apartment felt different when I walked in at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. Sarah wasn't home yet. She wouldn't be for another 3 hours. And the silence wasn't the usual empty silence of a place waiting for someone to return. It was a pregnant silence, heavy with possibility and uncertainty and the weight of what I'd just done. I stood in the middle of the living room, my coat still on, and realized I had no idea what to do with myself. For years, every minute of my day had been scheduled, optimized, allocated to specific tasks with specific outcomes. Now I had 3 unexpected hours of freedom, and I felt like a prisoner who'd just been released and didn't know how to function without the structure of captivity. My laptop sat on the coffee table, closed and dark. I could open it, could check emails, review projects, get ahead on work. The impulse was so strong it was almost physical, that pulled toward productivity, toward filling empty time with purposeful activity. Instead, I took off my coat, hung it in the closet, and just sat on the couch, doing nothing, being present, existing in a moment without trying to optimize it or move past it toward the next thing. It was harder than I expected. My mind kept trying to fill the space with planning, with worry, with mental rehearsals of conversations I might need to have or problems I might need to solve. Each time it happened, I'd notice it and try to bring myself back to the present, to the feeling of the couch beneath me, to the sound of traffic outside, to the late afternoon light filtering through the windows. This must be what meditation is supposed to feel like, I thought. This constant noticing and returning, noticing and returning. After about 20 minutes of this, which felt like both an eternity and an instant, I got up and did something else I hadn't done in years. I went to the bookshelf and pulled out a book I'd bought 3 years ago and never read. Not a business book, not a self-improvement manual, not something that would help me optimize or improve or achieve. Just a novel, fiction, a story about other people's lives that had nothing to do with mine. I made coffee slowly, manually, using the French press we'd gotten as a wedding gift and never used because it wasn't efficient, and I sat down to read. The first chapter was slow going. My mind kept wandering, kept trying to find the useful takeaway, the lesson, the actionable insight, but gradually as I forced myself to stay with it, something shifted. I fell into the story, lost myself in someone else's experience, let my consciousness inhabit a different life for a while. When Sarah came home at 5:30, she found me exactly where I'd been for 3 hours, on the couch, coffee, long cold, book in my lap, completely absorbed. "You're home," she said, and there was surprise in her voice. "And you're reading fiction, and your laptop is closed." I looked up, momentarily disoriented, like someone waking from a dream. "I turned down the promotion." She set down her bag slowly. "I got your text. I still can't quite believe it's real." "Neither can I." She came and sat next to me, taking the book from my hands and setting it aside. "How do you feel?" "Terrified," I said honestly. "Like I just jumped off a building and I'm in that moment of free fall before you either hit the ground or discover you can fly. And underneath the terror, there's this weird sense of rightness, like I finally did something true instead of just something logical." She took my hand, interlacing her fingers with mine. "I'm proud of you. I know that probably sounds condescending, but I am. You chose something hard and uncertain over something safe and predictable. That takes real courage. Or real stupidity. The jury's still out." "Tell me about your day," she said. "All of it. From the moment you woke up." So I did. I told her about standing in front of Cloud Gate, about meeting Frank, about our conversation, about Robert's surprising response, about the moment I hit send on that email and felt the ground shift beneath my feet. I told her about coming home and sitting on the couch doing nothing, about reading fiction for 3 hours, about feeling like I was learning to be a person again instead of just a productivity machine. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Can I tell you what I see happening?" she finally said. "Please. I see someone who's been holding his breath for years, finally starting to exhale. I see someone who's been clenched so tight he forgot what it felt like to be loose. I see someone who's been running so fast toward a future he thought he wanted that he forgot to notice he was running away from his actual life. Her words hit me with the force of truth I wasn't quite ready to hear. That's pretty intense for a Tuesday evening. I know, but we're past the point of not being intense with each other, don't you think? We've been slowly dying together for 2 years, Daniel. Being polite about it, being careful with each other, but dying nonetheless. And I don't want to die anymore. I want to live, and I think maybe, finally, you want to live too. I do, I said, and saying it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. I want to live. I want to be present. I want to be the guy you fell in love with, not the guy I turned into. Then we need to talk about some things. Real things. Hard things. Okay. She pulled her legs up onto the couch, turning to face me fully. First thing, money. We need to talk about what rejecting this promotion means financially. I'm not worried. We're fine. We have savings. I have my job. But we need to be honest about the practical implications. You're right. The promotion would have been a 40% raise plus bonuses. Without it, we're looking at staying at our current income level, which is fine, but limits some of our plans. What plans? I opened my mouth to list them. The house we were going to buy in 3 years, the wedding we were supposedly planning for next year, the investment strategy I'd mapped out, and then stopped. Plans I made without really asking if they were plans we both wanted. Exactly. So let's start fresh. What do we actually want? Not what's logical or optimal or fits the timeline, but what do we actually want our life to look like? It was such a simple question, but I realized I had no idea how to answer it. What did I want? Not what should I want? Not what made sense to want, but what did my actual heart, my actual soul actually desire? I don't know, I admitted. I've spent so long focused on what I should want that I've lost touch with what I actually want. Then let's figure it out together. But first, there's something else we need to talk about. She took a deep breath. I told you I was thinking about moving out, giving us space. My chest tightened. And I'm not going to. Not yet. Not unless you slide back into who you were before Sunday night. Because what I see right now gives me hope. But Daniel, I need you to understand something. I can't be the only thing holding you accountable to this change. I can't be your motivation or your reason or your purpose. This has to be your journey, your choice, your transformation. I can support it and celebrate it and walk alongside it, but I can't be the one doing the work for you. I understand. Do you? Because I've watched you optimize everything in your life, including our relationship. You've treated me like a variable in your equations, like a factor in your plans. And I need you to see me as a person. A separate person with my own desires and fears and needs that don't exist just to fit into your spreadsheets. The words stung, but they were true. I had been doing exactly that, optimizing our relationship, managing it, trying to control it instead of just living it. You're right, I said. I've been treating you like a project instead of a partner. And I'm sorry, I don't have a plan for how to change that because planning is the whole problem, but I want to. I want to see you, really see you, as yourself and not as how you fit into my life strategy. That's a start, she said, and there was something softer in her voice now. Now, second thing, this voice you heard, this experience with God, we need to talk about that too. Okay? I'm not religious, you know that. I grew up going to church but left it behind in college because it all felt performative and empty. So when you tell me God spoke to you, part of me wants to believe it because I see how it's affecting you, but part of me is skeptical because, well, I'm skeptical of that whole framework. I get that. I'm skeptical too, honestly. The rational part of me keeps trying to explain it away. But something happened, something real, something that wasn't just my brain playing tricks on me or my subconscious giving me what I needed to hear. There was a presence, Sarah, an intelligence, a knowing that was completely other than my own thoughts, and I can't unexperience that, no matter how much the skeptical part of me wants to. She was quiet, processing. What are you going to do with it? This experience? I don't know. I don't even know what it means to have a relationship with God beyond going to church and following rules, and I'm not sure either of those things is what I'm being called to. I just know that I need to stay open to it. Need to keep listening for that voice, that presence, that whatever it was that spoke to me. Will you do something for me? She asked. Anything. Don't get weird about it. Don't become one of those people who can't talk about anything except their spiritual journey. Don't use God as an excuse to avoid responsibility or hard work. And don't, please don't, try to convert me or save me or make me have the same experience you had. I promise. This is my journey, not yours. You get to have your own relationship with whatever you believe or don't believe, and I'm not going to impose mine on you. She leaned in and kissed me softly, and it felt like the first real kiss we'd shared in months. Not perfunctory, not distracted, but present and intentional and full of actual feeling. I've missed you, she whispered against my lips. I've missed me too, I said, and we both laughed, and then we were kissing again. And then we were making dinner together, actually cooking instead of ordering in or eating separately or rushing through a meal to get back to work. We made pasta from scratch, something we'd done on our third date and never done since. It was messy and time-consuming and completely inefficient, and it was perfect. We talked while we cooked, really talked, about things that mattered and things that didn't, about our days and our fears and our hopes and our memories. Remember when we went to that terrible open mic night? Sarah said, rolling out pasta dough. And that guy sang all of American Pie but couldn't remember half the words, so he just made them up? Oh God, yes. And you laughed so hard you snorted wine out your nose. I did not snort. You absolutely snorted. It was adorable. When did we stop doing things like that? She asked, suddenly serious. When did we stop going to random events and trying new restaurants and staying up too late just talking? When I decided our time needed to be optimized, I said. When I turned our life into a project with objectives and key results instead of, an actual life. Can we do it again? The random things, the adventures, the staying up too late? Yes, I want that. I want all of that. We ate dinner at the table. No phones, no laptop, no TV in the background. Just us. The pasta we'd made together, a bottle of wine, and conversation that flowed naturally instead of feeling forced or awkward. Afterward, as we cleaned up together, Sarah said, I have a crazy idea. I'm listening. Let's go somewhere this weekend, somewhere we've never been. No planning, no research, no reading reviews or making reservations. Just pick a direction and drive and see where we end up. The old me would have immediately started calculating gas costs, hotel availability, weather patterns, optimal routes. The new me, the one who was slowly emerging from under years of control and planning, just said, yes, let's do it. Really? Just like that? No spreadsheet? No spreadsheet, no plan, just an adventure. She hugged me tightly. Who are you? And what have you done with my boyfriend? I'm working on becoming someone better, I said. Someone who can live life instead of just managing it. That night, lying in bed together again, a small miracle, I found myself praying, not asking for anything specific, not bargaining or begging, just talking to whatever presence had spoken to me Sunday night. God, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be the person I'm supposed to be. I don't know how to trust instead of control, how to live in the present instead of the future, how to be open instead of defended. But I'm trying, and I need your help because I can't do this on my own. My default setting is control and planning and optimization, and it's going to take more than willpower to change that. It's going to take transformation, and I don't even know what that means or how it happens, but I'm asking for it anyway. Transform me, change me, make me into someone who can actually live the life I've been given instead of trying to design a better one. Next to me, Sarah's breathing had deepened into sleep. I lay there in the darkness, feeling the weight and wonder of the past few days. It had only been 3 days since that panic attack, since that voice, since those 7 words that had started to crack open my carefully controlled life. 3 days. It felt like a lifetime. I thought about Frank in the park, about his story of choosing the wrong path and spending years regretting it. I thought about Robert's unexpected kindness and his own admission of regret. I thought about all the people out there living lives they didn't want, following paths they never chose, being successful by external measures while dying inside. And I thought about those words. Your tomorrow will not be as you imagine. I have already taken care of it. A deal. What did that mean, practically? That I should just stop planning entirely? That I should make no preparations, no provisions, no sensible decisions about the future? That seemed irresponsible, even reckless. But maybe it meant something more nuanced. Maybe it meant holding plans lightly instead of tightly. Maybe it meant being open to disruption instead of afraid of it. Maybe it meant trusting that there was a larger story being written, a story I could participate in but couldn't control. Maybe it meant learning to live in response rather than in anticipation, to respond to what was actually happening instead of constantly trying to predict and prevent what might happen. I didn't have answers, but for the first time in my life, I was okay with that. The not knowing didn't feel like failure anymore. It felt like freedom. Wednesday morning, I woke up without an alarm for the third day in a row. The sun was streaming through the windows, and Sarah was already up, sitting in bed with her laptop, working on something. "Morning," I said, stretching. "Morning. I have a question for you." "Shoot. What are you going to do now?" Like, practically speaking. "You turned down the promotion, which is huge and brave, and I'm proud of you. But what's next?" It was a fair question, and I realized I had an answer, even if it wasn't complete. "I'm going to stay in my current position for now. It's good work, it pays the bills, and I can do it without it consuming my entire life. But I'm also going to start exploring, trying things, following curiosity instead of career strategy." "Like what?" "I don't know yet, that's the point. I've spent so long only doing things that advanced my career or optimized my life that I've lost touch with what actually interests me. So I'm going to try things just because they seem interesting, not because they're useful." "That's very unlike you." "I know. It terrifies me, but it also feels right." She closed her laptop and turned to face me fully. "I love this version of you. This uncertain, exploring, trying things version. Don't lose him, okay? Even when it gets hard, even when the old habits start calling you back, fight for this person you're becoming." "I will," I promised. "I'm going to need help, though. I'm going to need you to call me out when you see me slipping back into old patterns." "I can do that. But remember what I said. This is your journey. I can support it, but I can't do it for you. I know, and that's how it should be." I got ready for work, slowly, mindfully, noticing the feeling of water on my skin in the shower, the taste of coffee, the sound of the city waking up outside. Every moment felt more vivid, more present, more real than it had in years. When I got to the office, Marcus was waiting at my desk. "Dude, word travels fast. Did you really turn down the promotion?" "I did." "Are you insane? Do you have a brain tumor? Did you join a cult? Because there has to be some explanation for turning down a 40% raise and a corner office." I smiled. "No tumor, no cult. Just a realization that climbing the ladder isn't worth it if you're climbing towards something you don't actually want." He stared at me like I'd started speaking a foreign language. "But it's success. It's achievement. It's what we all work for." "Is it? Do you want to be senior analyst? Do you want the corner office and the stress and the longer hours and the bigger responsibilities?" He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it, then opened it again. "I've never actually asked myself that question. Maybe you should. What are you going to do instead?" "I don't know yet. That's the scary and exciting part. I'm going to figure it out as I go, instead of planning it all in advance." Marcus sat down heavily in my guest chair. "This is the weirdest midlife crisis I've ever witnessed, and my dad bought a motorcycle and started a band when he turned 50. It's not a midlife crisis. It's more like a midlife awakening. I've been asleep for years, Marcus, going through the motions, checking boxes, climbing ladders, and I finally woke up and realized I was building a life I didn't want to live. And the panic attack, the voice, all that stuff you told me about, that was the alarm clock. God hitting the wake-up button on my life." He was quiet for a long moment. "I'm happy for you, man. Terrified for you too, because this seems crazy, but happy. You seem lighter somehow, less tense." "I feel lighter, like I've been carrying a weight I didn't know I was carrying and finally set it down." "Just promise me one thing," Marcus said, standing up. promise me you won't become one of those annoying people who's always talking about their journey and telling everyone else how to live. I promise. This is my journey, not yours. You get to have your own wake-up call or not. Totally up to you. Good, because I'm not ready to give up my ladder climbing just yet. We both laughed, and then he headed back to his desk, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my work and my slowly transforming life. I opened my computer and looked at my task list for the day. It was still there, still demanding attention, still pulling at me, but it didn't have the same power it once did. It was just work, important, necessary, worth doing well, but not my identity, not my purpose, not my God, and that made all the difference. Friday afternoon arrived with the kind of restless energy that comes from anticipation. Sarah and I had stuck to our plan, or rather our non-plan. We were going to leave Saturday morning, drive in whatever direction felt right, and see where we ended up. No hotel reservations, no itinerary, no research on the best restaurants or must-see attractions. The old me would have been climbing the walls with anxiety by now. The new me, the one still emerging from the chrysalis of control, was managing to sit with the uncertainty, though not without effort. I was at my desk finishing up some work when Marcus appeared with 2 cups of coffee and a concerned expression. "Intervention time," he said, setting 1 cup in front of me. "I don't need an intervention." "That's what everyone who needs an intervention says." He sat down, took a sip of his coffee and studied me. "You've been different all week. Good different mostly, but also kind of manic different. Like you're running on some kind of spiritual high that's going to crash eventually." "Is this the intervention? Because it's not very good." "I'm serious, Daniel. I'm happy you're making changes. I'm glad you're not having panic attacks on your bedroom floor. But I'm worried you're swinging too far in the opposite direction. Going from obsessive control to complete chaos isn't necessarily healthy either." I leaned back in my chair, considering his words. "What makes you think it's chaos? Because you turned down a major promotion with no backup plan. Because you're taking a spontaneous road trip with no destination. Because you deleted 5 years of career planning on a whim. That's not measured change, man. That's burning your life down and hoping something better grows from the ashes. Maybe that's exactly what I need to do. Or maybe you're just trading one extreme for another. Maybe the answer isn't control versus chaos, but something in between." His words hit harder than I wanted to admit. Was he right? Was I overcorrecting? Swinging from one extreme to another without finding any middle ground? "I appreciate the concern," I said finally, "but I think I need to go too far in this direction for a while. I've spent my entire adult life weighted so heavily toward control that I need to experience the other side to even find the middle." "Just promise me something," Marcus said. "Promise me you'll check in with yourself. Make sure this is actually healing and not just another way of running from your problems." "I promise." "And Marcus, thank you for caring enough to say something." He nodded and stood up. "Anytime. And hey, if this spiritual awakening thing works out, maybe I'll have one too. But for now, I've got reports to file and a ladder to climb." After he left, I sat with his words. Was I running from something? Was this transformation real? Or was it just another form of control, trying to force myself to be someone I wasn't? I closed my eyes and tried to find that sense of presence, that connection to something larger than myself. And slowly, underneath the noise of my mind, I felt it. Not a voice this time, but a knowing. A sense that what I was doing was right, even if it looked crazy from the outside, even if it scared me, even if I couldn't predict where it would lead. That evening, Sarah came home with a small backpack packed with clothes for the weekend. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, setting the bag by the door. "Ready to drive somewhere with no plan and no reservations?" "Absolutely terrified, but yes." She laughed. "Good. Terror means you're still sane. Complete confidence would mean you'd lost your mind." We spent the evening doing something radical. Nothing. No meal prep for next week. No laundry. No cleaning. No getting ahead on anything. We just existed together, watching a movie, making popcorn, being present in the moment. Around 10 p.m., Sarah turned to me with a question I could see she'd been holding back. Can I ask you something about the God thing? Of course. And when you pray, because I know you've been praying, what does that actually mean for you? Like, are you talking to a person? A force? The universe? What? I thought about it, trying to find words for something I barely understood myself. Honestly, I don't know. It's not like talking to a person sitting across from me. It's more like opening a door inside myself and speaking towards something I can sense but can't see. Sometimes it feels like speaking into emptiness. But other times there's this response. Not words usually, but a knowing, a peace, a sense of being heard and understood and held by something larger than myself. That sounds kind of beautiful, actually. It is. And it's also weird and uncomfortable because I don't have control over it. I can't make it happen. I can't optimize my prayer life or create a system for spiritual experiences. I just have to be open and vulnerable and trust that there's something there, even when I can't feel it. Which must be torture for you. It really is, I admitted, and we both laughed. Do you believe in heaven and hell and all that stuff? She asked. I don't know. That's the honest answer. I don't know what I believe about most of the big theological questions. I just know that something real happened to me Sunday night. Something that's changing me from the inside out. And I'm trying to stay open to it without getting caught up in having all the right answers or beliefs. She was quiet for a moment. I think that's probably healthier than most religious people's approach. Most of them seem so certain about everything, like they've got God all figured out and packaged in a nice, neat system. Yeah, well, I've tried to package everything in nice, neat systems my whole life, and look where that got me. So maybe the point is to not have God figured out. Maybe the point is to be in relationship with mystery instead of trying to solve it. That's very philosophical for a Friday night. I contain multitudes. She snuggled closer to me on the couch. I like this version of you, the one who's okay with not knowing everything. I like him too, though he's still terrified most of the time. Good. Fear means you're growing. Comfort means you're stagnating. We stayed up later than we'd planned, just talking about everything and nothing. About her work and the project she was excited about. About her mother who was dealing with health issues. About the friends we'd lost touch with over the years, as my obsession with control had narrowed our social circle to almost nothing. We should have a dinner party, Sarah said suddenly. Remember when we used to do that? Before you decided entertaining was an inefficient use of time? I cringed. Did I actually say that? You did. You calculated the cost per hour of social engagement versus the return on investment in terms of career networking. I was a monster. You were lost. There's a difference. But yes, let's have a dinner party. Let's invite people over and cook too much food and stay up too late and not worry about whether it's advancing any particular agenda. Yes, let's do that. Saturday morning came too early and not early enough. I'd slept fitfully. My dreams full of roads that split into infinite directions and voices calling me toward destinations I couldn't see. When I woke, Sarah was already up, sitting by the window with her coffee, watching the sun rise over the city. Couldn't sleep, I asked. Too excited. I feel like a kid on Christmas morning. Because we're driving somewhere with no plan. Because we're doing something spontaneous. Because we're choosing adventure over certainty. Because you're different and we're different, and I want to see where this version of us can go. We loaded the car with our minimal bags. Sarah had convinced me to pack only what fit in a backpack, no backup options, no just-in-case items. It was strangely liberating to have so little, to be so unburdened. Okay, Sarah said, settling into the passenger seat. Ground rules. No GPS unless we're completely lost. No checking reviews of restaurants or hotels. No planning more than an hour ahead. And most importantly, no deciding in advance how we're supposed to feel about anything. We just experience it and let it be what it is. Those are good rules. Terrifying, but good. So which direction? I looked at the 4 directions available to us from our parking spot. North led deeper into Chicago, south toward Indiana, east toward Lake Michigan, west toward the open country. West, I said, surprising myself. Let's go west. West it is. I pulled out of the parking lot and pointed the car toward the setting sun, or rather, where the sun would set later, since it was only 9 a.m. We drove through the city, through the suburbs, and gradually into the open farmland of western Illinois. The landscape was beautiful in its simplicity, flat fields stretching to the horizon, punctuated by farmhouses and grain silos, and the occasional town too small to be called a city. The sky was enormous out here, larger than it ever seemed in Chicago, and the clouds cast moving shadows across the fields like living things. We drove in comfortable silence for a while. No music, no podcast, just the sound of the car and the road and our own thoughts. "This is nice," Sarah said finally. "Just driving, no agenda, no timeline, no pressure to optimize the experience." "It is nice. Though I've already caught myself 3 times trying to calculate our fuel efficiency and whether we should have left earlier to avoid traffic. At least you're catching yourself. That's progress." Around noon, we came to a small town called Galena. It looked like something from a postcard. Historic buildings, tree-lined streets, a main street full of local shops. "Should we stop?" I asked. "Do you want to?" "I don't know. That's the weird thing. I'm so used to deciding whether something is worth doing based on whether it serves a purpose that I don't know how to decide just based on whether I want to do it." "Then let's stop. We'll walk around. If it's boring, we leave. If it's interesting, we stay. No pressure either way." We parked on a side street and walked into town. Galena turned out to be charming in that authentic small-town way that you can't fake. There were art galleries featuring local artists, a bookstore that smelled like old paper and coffee, restaurants with handwritten menus, and people who smiled and said hello as we passed. In the bookstore, Sarah disappeared into the fiction section, while I found myself drawn to a small shelf labeled Local History. I pulled out a thin volume about Galena's role in the Civil War and found myself genuinely interested, reading not because I should know this information, but because I was curious. "Finding anything good?" Sarah appeared at my elbow with 3 novels. "Did you know Ulysses S. Grant lived here? There's a whole history about how he went from working in his father's leather shop to becoming a general and eventually president." "Are you actually interested in history? Since when?" "Since right now, apparently. I never let myself just explore topics because they were interesting. Everything had to be relevant to my career or goals or self-improvement plan. But this is just interesting, for its own sake." She smiled. "Buy the book. Read it because you want to, not because you should." I did. I bought the book, and Sarah bought her 3 novels, and the woman behind the counter, elderly with kind eyes, smiled at our purchases. "You 2 aren't from around here," she said. It wasn't a question. "Chicago," Sarah said. "We're on a road trip with no destination." "Well, isn't that romantic? My husband and I did something like that on our honeymoon 50 years ago. Ended up in places we never would have found if we'd planned it all out." She wrapped our books carefully in brown paper. "Sometimes the best adventures are the ones you don't plan. Someone very wise told me recently that tomorrow won't be as I imagine," I said, surprising myself. The woman's hands stilled on the package. She looked up at me with sharp, searching eyes. "That's scripture, you know. Do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a day may bring." Proverbs 27:1. Though the way you said it sounds more personal than just knowing the verse. It was personal. Someone, something, told me that exact phrase during a moment when I desperately needed to hear it. She nodded slowly, wisely. God has a way of speaking to us in the language we need to hear. For some people it's scripture. For others, it's 7 words in the middle of a panic attack that crack open their whole life. She handed me the wrapped books. "Hold on to what you heard. The voice that speaks in crisis often goes quiet in comfort, and we forget." "Don't forget." "I won't," I said, and I meant it. We left the bookstore and found a small cafe where we ate lunch. Sandwiches and soup that were simple and perfect and made with actual care. We sat outside at a small table watching people walk by, not talking much, just being. "I like this," Sarah said. this slowed-down version of life. Me too. Though I'm terrified of what happens on Monday when we go back to work and real life and all the demands that don't care about our spontaneous road trip. Then we bring this with us. We remember what this feels like, and we fight to keep it, even when it's hard. After lunch, we walked to the river that ran through town. There was a small park there, and we sat on a bench watching the water flow past, constant and patient and utterly indifferent to human concerns about planning and control. "Can I tell you something?" Sarah said. "Always. I was planning to leave you before Sunday, before your panic attack, before all of this. I had already started looking at apartments, had a deposit ready to put down on a place I'd found." The words hit like a physical blow, even though part of me had known. "How close were you?" "I was going to tell you next week. Was going to move out the following weekend." "What changed?" "You did. Or rather, you started to. And I saw a glimmer of the person I fell in love with, and I decided to wait, to see if it was real or just a temporary crack in the facade." She turned to look at me directly. "Daniel, I need you to know how serious this is. I'm here, I'm trying, I'm hopeful. But if you slide back into who you were, if this is just a brief disruption before you return to your spreadsheets and your 5-year plans and your optimization, I will leave. I can't watch you disappear again." "I understand. And I don't blame you. If I were you, I'd probably have left already. The thing is, I love you, the real you, the person underneath all the control and planning, and I believe that person is still in there, trying to emerge. But he has to want to emerge. He has to fight for it. I can't want it for you. I do want it. I want to be present and alive and connected to you and to my own life. I want to stop trying to control tomorrow and start actually living today. But Sarah, I'm terrified I'll fail, that my default programming is too strong, that I'll slip back without even realizing it. Then we need accountability, real accountability, not me nagging you or monitoring you, but regular check-ins where we're honest about how we're doing, where you can admit when you're struggling without shame, and where I can tell you when I see you sliding backward without it becoming a fight. Like what? Like every Sunday evening we sit down together and we ask each other 3 questions. How present were you this week? What did you try to control that you should have released? What brought you joy? And we answer honestly no matter what. That's a good idea. Let's do that. We sat there by the river for another hour, not talking about anything heavy, just being together in the moment. At some point, Sarah's hand found mine, and we sat holding hands like teenagers, watching the water and the people and the afternoon light change as the sun moved across the sky. Eventually, we continued driving west. We crossed into Iowa as the afternoon stretched toward evening, and somewhere around 6 p.m., we found ourselves in a town called Dubuque, right on the Mississippi River. "Should we stay here?" I asked. "Does it feel right?" I looked around at the town, larger than Galena but still manageable, with a historic downtown and riverfront. "Yeah, it feels right." We found a small bed and breakfast, the kind of place that probably would have made my old self uncomfortable because it was too quaint, too inefficient, too impractical. But the woman who ran it was warm and welcoming, and the room she showed us was perfect in its simplicity. "You two look happy," she said as she handed us the key. "Anniversary trip?" "New beginning trip," Sarah said, and the woman smiled like she understood exactly what that meant. That evening we walked along the riverfront as the sun set over the Mississippi. The water was wide and slow and ancient, and I found myself thinking about time, about how rivers flow regardless of human planning, about how the water doesn't worry about tomorrow. It just flows where the current takes it, trusting the banks to hold it, the gravity to move it, the ocean to receive it. Your tomorrow will not be as you imagine. I have already taken care of it. The words came back to me with new meaning. Maybe tomorrow being different than I imagined wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Maybe God wasn't warning me that my plans would fail, but inviting me to stop making plans altogether, to trust the current, to let the river carry me where it would. "What are you thinking about?" Sarah asked. "Rivers and trust, and how maybe the point isn't to control the current, but to learn to swim in it." "That's very poetic." I'm trying this new thing where I let myself have thoughts that aren't immediately practical or actionable." She laughed and leaned into me. "I like this version of you so much." We found a small restaurant for dinner, a family-owned Italian place where the portions were huge and the wine was cheap, and the owner came out to talk to every table like they were old friends. We ate slowly, talked about nothing and everything, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd enjoyed a meal this much. After dinner, we walked back to the bed and breakfast under a sky full of stars. In Chicago, you couldn't see stars. Too much light pollution. But out here, away from the city, the sky was alive with them. Thousands of points of light, each one a sun, each one surrounded by space too vast to comprehend. "Makes you feel small, doesn't it?" Sarah said, looking up. "In a good way. Like my problems and plans and anxieties are so tiny compared to the universe, like maybe I can stop taking myself so seriously." That night, lying in bed in a strange room in a strange town, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Complete contentment. Not because everything was perfect or because I had everything figured out, but because I was exactly where I was supposed to be, in this moment, with this person, on this journey that I couldn't predict or control. "Sarah," I whispered into the darkness. "Yeah? Thank you for not leaving. Thank you for giving me another chance. Thank you for becoming someone worth staying for." I fell asleep with her hand in mine, with the sound of the river in the distance, with the sense that I was finally starting to live, instead of just planning to live. Sunday morning, we woke late. No alarm, no schedule, no agenda. We had breakfast at the bed, and breakfast with other guests, making small talk with strangers, being friendly and open and present. Then we drove home, taking back roads instead of highways, stopping whenever something looked interesting, arriving back in Chicago around dinner time. Our apartment felt different when we walked in. Same furniture, same layout, but somehow transformed by our absence. Or maybe we were transformed, and the apartment just reflected it. "That was perfect," Sarah said, dropping her bag by the door. "Can we do it again sometime?" "Any time. No planning required." We spent the evening unpacking and settling back in, and then, true to Sarah's suggestion, we sat down for our first Sunday check-in. "How present were you this week?" Sarah asked. "More present than I've been in years, but I notice myself slipping sometimes, especially Friday when Marcus questioned what I was doing. My first instinct was to defend myself with logic and planning, instead of just trusting what I know to be true. What did you try to control that you should have released?" "The road trip itself at first. I kept trying to make micro-plans, even little ones, but I caught myself and let it go." "What brought you joy?" "Everything. Reading for pleasure, cooking with you, the bookstore in Galena, the river, the stars, being surprised by life instead of trying to script it." Sarah's turn came next, and she answered with equal honesty. It was hard and vulnerable, and exactly what we needed. When we finished, I felt lighter, accountable but not judged, seen but not fixed. That night, I prayed one more time before sleep. "God, this week changed me. Turning down that promotion, taking that trip, being present with Sarah, all of it felt like learning to swim in the current instead of fighting it. But I know Monday is coming. I know work and stress and old habits are all waiting for me. So I'm asking, help me remember. Help me hold on to what I learned. Help me keep trusting that tomorrow is already taken care of so I can stop trying to do your job and start doing mine, which is just to live fully and presently and gratefully, one day at a time." In the darkness, I felt that presence again. Not speaking this time, but there, holding, supporting, promising. Tomorrow would not be as I imagined, and that was exactly how it should be. Monday morning arrived like a test I hadn't studied for. The alarm went off at 6:30 a.m., and for a moment, I lay there feeling the weight of reality settling back over me. The weekend had been a beautiful bubble, spontaneous, free, disconnected from the demands of ordinary life. But now, the bubble was popping, and I had to figure out how to carry what I'd learned back into the world that had shaped me into the person I'd been trying to escape. Sarah was already up, moving quietly around the bedroom, getting ready for her day. I watched her for a moment, remembering her words by the river. I was planning to leave you. The fact that she'd stayed, that she was giving me this chance, felt like both a gift and a responsibility I wasn't sure I could handle. "You're awake," she said, noticing my open eyes. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous. Like I'm about to walk back into a trap I just escaped from." "Then don't walk back into it. Walk back into the same building, the same job, the same responsibilities, but as a different person, as someone who remembers what matters." That sounds easier than it is. I know, but that's why we're doing the Sunday check-ins. That's why we're in this together. You don't have to be perfect, Daniel. You just have to keep choosing presence over control, trust over planning. I got up and went through my morning routine, noticing how easily the old patterns wanted to reassert themselves. Check phone immediately, review calendar, mentally rehearse the day ahead. Each time I caught myself doing it, I'd pause, breathe, and try to just be present with whatever I was doing. Brushing my teeth, making coffee, eating breakfast. It was exhausting, this constant vigilance against my own defaults. The commute felt different today. I'd taken the same train hundreds of times, but I'd always used the time to work. Emails, reading reports, planning presentations. Today, I just sat and watched the city go by, watched the other commuters with their own worried faces and distracted eyes, and I wondered how many of them were also trapped in lives they hadn't really chosen. At the office, I found a note on my desk from Robert. "See me when you get in." My stomach clenched automatically. A note from the boss was never good, especially not after turning down a promotion and essentially telling him I didn't want to climb the ladder anymore. What if they were letting me go? What if my moment of spiritual awakening had just cost me my livelihood? The old Daniel would have spiraled into catastrophic thinking, running through worst-case scenarios and contingency plans. The new Daniel, the one I was trying to become, took a breath and walked to Robert's office. "You wanted to see me?" Robert looked up from his computer and gestured to a chair. "Close the door and sit down." I did, my heart pounding. This was it. This was where I learned that choosing trust over control had consequences in the real world. "I've been thinking about our conversation," Robert began, "about what you said regarding needing to make fundamental changes in your life. If this is about the promotion, I understand if—" He held up a hand. "Let me finish. I've been thinking about it because it made me realize something about myself, about this job, about what we're all doing here." I waited, confused about where this was going. "I've been in corporate finance for 23 years, he continued. "I've climbed the ladder, made the sacrifices, done everything you're supposed to do to be successful. And you know what? I'm miserable. My marriage is hanging by a thread. My kids barely know me. I have enough money to be comfortable and enough stress to make me wonder if it's worth it. Robert, when you turned down that promotion, it woke something up in me. Made me ask myself why I'm still doing this. Why I'm still chasing the next title, the next raise, the next achievement, when none of it is making me happy." He leaned back in his chair, looking suddenly older, more tired. "So I'm telling you this because I want you to know that what you did took courage, real courage, and I respect it, even if I don't have the guts to do it myself. You could, though. Make changes, I mean." Could I? I'm 51 years old, Daniel. I've got a mortgage, college tuitions, aging parents who need help. I'm trapped by choices I made 20 years ago. But you caught it early enough to actually change course. Don't waste that opportunity." We sat in silence for a moment. Two men at different stages of life, both wrestling with the same fundamental question. What are we actually living for? "I asked you here for a reason," Robert finally said, shifting back to business mode. "We're starting a new project next month. Analysis of sustainable investment portfolios for clients who want to align their money with their values. It's smaller than what you've been working on, less prestigious, probably won't lead to rapid advancement. But I thought of you for it because it's interesting work, meaningful work, the kind of thing that might let you do your job well without it consuming your soul." "Are you serious?" "Completely. It would mean stepping back from some of your current high-profile clients, taking a slightly less visible role, but based on what you told me about needing to change how you approach your life, I thought it might fit what you're looking for. I thought about it. Lower profile, less pressure, work that aligned with values instead of just profit. It was the opposite of what I would have wanted 2 weeks ago, but now I'd like that. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. It's still corporate work. Still deadlines and demands and all the rest, but maybe a little more human-sized, a little more aligned with actually living a life instead of just building a career. As I left his office, I felt something shift. This was what it meant to trust that tomorrow was already taken care of. I hadn't planned for this opportunity, hadn't strategized or positioned myself for it. It had just appeared at exactly the moment I needed it, because I'd been open to something different. The rest of the morning was routine work, emails, reports, analysis, but I noticed something different in how I approached it. Before, every task had been weighted with significance, with implications for my future, with pressure to perform at the highest level. Now, it was just work, important work, work worth doing well, but not work that defined my worth as a person. Around 11, Marcus appeared at my desk with his usual coffee and curiosity. "You survived the weekend without a plan. How was it?" "It was perfect. Scary and uncomfortable and perfect." "Where'd you end up?" "Iowa, small town called Dubuque. We drove, we stopped when something looked interesting. We had no agenda, and I didn't have a single panic attack or moment of crisis about not being in control. That's actually kind of beautiful. Weird, but beautiful." He sipped his coffee. "So what happens now? You can't road trip every weekend. Eventually you have to live your normal life with all this new spiritual enlightenment or whatever we're calling it." "I know. That's what today is about. Figuring out how to be different in the same circumstances." "And? How's it going?" "Better than expected. Robert offered me a new project, smaller, less visible, but more meaningful. And I said yes, without analyzing it to death or trying to figure out how it fits into a 5-year plan. Marcus raised his eyebrows. "Who are you and what have you done with my friend?" "I'm still figuring that out." We talked for a few more minutes before Marcus headed back to his desk and I returned to my work. But his question stayed with me. Who was I becoming? I knew who I'd been. The control freak, the planner, the guy who couldn't relax because he was always 10 steps ahead. But the new person emerging from that chrysalis, who was he? At lunch, I did something else different. Instead of eating at my desk while working, I actually left the building, walked to a nearby park, sat on a bench with my sandwich and just watched the world go by. People walking dogs, parents with strollers, office workers on their lunch breaks, most of them staring at their phones like I used to do. I pulled out the book I'd bought in Galena, The History of Ulysses S. Grant. Started reading, not because it would improve my career or expand my professional knowledge, but simply because I was curious. And as I read about Grant's struggle with failure and obscurity before his eventual success, I found myself thinking about my own journey. Grant had failed at everything before the Civil War, failed at farming, failed at business, ended up working in his father's leather shop at age 38, considered a disappointment by almost everyone who knew him. But then circumstances changed, and the qualities that had made him unsuccessful in business, his stubbornness, his willingness to take risks, his ability to see what others couldn't, made him brilliant as a general. Was that what was happening to me? Were the qualities I'd developed, planning, analysis, strategic thinking, not wrong but just misapplied? Maybe the issue wasn't that I needed to abandon those qualities entirely, but that I needed to use them in service of something bigger than my own anxiety about the future. When I got back to the office, there was an email from Sarah. "How's the first day back? Are you surviving?" I wrote back, "Surviving and actually kind of thriving." Robert offered me a new project that feels right. Still scared I'll slip back into old patterns, but I'm trying. "How are you?" Her response came quickly. "Proud of you. Let's cook dinner together tonight." No planning, just cooking. That evening we met at the apartment and made dinner together. Actually made it from scratch, with no recipe, just throwing ingredients together and seeing what happened. It was chaotic and messy, and the result was only mediocre, but the process was joyful in a way that perfectly executed meals from my meal prep plans had never been. "Tell me about your day," Sarah said as we ate our improvised stir-fry. So I told her everything. About Robert's confession, about the new project, about reading in the park, about the constant vigilance required to not slip back into old patterns. "It sounds exhausting," she said. "It is. I had no idea how much energy I was putting into control and planning until I tried to stop doing it. It's like I've been running on a treadmill my whole life, and now I'm trying to learn to just walk on solid ground. And it's actually harder because I have to pay attention to every step." That's a good metaphor. But Daniel, you know it's going to get easier, right? Eventually the new patterns will become automatic, just like the old ones were. Meh. What if they don't? What if I'm just fighting my own nature? What if the real me is the control freak and this other person I'm trying to become is just a fantasy? She set down her fork and looked at me seriously. "Do you remember what you were like when we first met, before all the planning and controlling took over?" "Barely. You were spontaneous. You were curious about things just for the sake of being curious. You laughed more. You were present in conversations instead of always thinking 3 steps ahead. That person wasn't a fantasy, Daniel. That person was you before you got scared and started trying to control everything." "So what happened? Why did I change?" She thought about it. "I think you got successful, and success made you afraid of losing what you'd gained. So you started trying to protect it, control it, ensure it. And slowly, protecting your success became more important than actually living your life." Her words hit hard because they were true. I could trace it back to my first promotion 5 years ago. That's when the planning had really kicked into high gear. That's when I'd started seeing life as a series of chess moves instead of something to be experienced. "So how do I break that pattern?" I asked. "You already are. Every day you choose presence over control. You're breaking it a little more. Every time you catch yourself slipping and choose differently, you're rewriting the pattern. It's not going to happen overnight, but it is happening." We finished dinner and cleaned up together, and then we did something we hadn't done in months. We went for a walk, just around the neighborhood. No destination, no fitness tracking, no purpose other than being outside together. The evening was cool and pleasant, and as we walked, I found myself noticing things I'd never paid attention to before. The smell of someone grilling, the sound of children playing in a backyard, the way the light hit the buildings as the sun set. All these little details of life I'd been too busy planning the future to notice. "Can I ask you something?" I said as we rounded a corner. "Always. When you said you were planning to leave, when you had the apartment picked out, what made you decide to stay, really?" She was quiet for a moment, considering. "It wasn't one thing. It was a series of small moments that added up. The way you closed your laptop during our conversation. The way you talked about hearing from God without trying to explain it away or systematize it. The way you looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in months. And then when you turned down the promotion, I knew something fundamental had shifted. What if it shifts back? Then I leave. I know that sounds harsh, but Daniel, I can't live with the person you are becoming. I can live with the person you're trying to become, even if it's messy and imperfect, and sometimes you fail. But I can't go back to being with someone who's always somewhere else, always planning, always controlling." "I understand, and I don't blame you." "Good. Because I need you to know this isn't about me giving you an ultimatum. It's about me choosing to stay for someone who's choosing to change. But if you stop choosing change, I'll have to choose myself." We walked in silence for a while, holding hands, both of us aware of the fragility of this moment, this new beginning that could so easily slip back into old patterns. When we got home, I found myself drawn to prayer again. It was becoming a habit. This talking to God or the universe or whatever presence had spoken to me that night. I didn't always feel a response, didn't always get clarity or peace or answers. But the act of opening myself up, of admitting I didn't have control, of asking for help, it was becoming essential. "God," I prayed quietly, Sarah already asleep beside me. Today was good, better than I expected, but I'm scared of tomorrow, and the day after that, and all the days stretching ahead where I'll have to keep making these choices. I'm scared I'll forget, scared I'll slip back, scared that what feels real right now will fade into just a memory of a weird week when I thought I heard your voice. I paused, waiting, and in the silence I felt something. Not a voice, not words, but a presence, a reminder. And in that presence, I remembered those 7 words. Your tomorrow will not be as you imagine. I have already taken care of it. The words meant something different now than they had a week ago. Then they'd been about letting go of control, about trusting that I didn't need to plan every detail. But now, lying here after my first day back in the real world, they meant something more. They meant that tomorrow would bring challenges I couldn't predict, moments of temptation to slip back into old patterns, situations that would test my resolve, days when living differently would feel too hard and the old ways would seem easier. But those challenges were already accounted for, already taken care of, not eliminated, but prepared for in ways I couldn't see yet. I didn't need to control tomorrow. I just needed to show up for it. Tuesday came and went. Wednesday followed, Thursday arrived. Each day was a practice in presence, in catching myself when I started to slip into old patterns, in choosing differently. Some days were easier than others. Some moments I felt like I was making real progress. Other moments I felt like I was barely holding on, like the old Daniel was waiting just beneath the surface, ready to re-emerge at the first sign of crisis. By Thursday evening I was exhausted. Not from work. Work was fine. The new project was interesting. My responsibilities were manageable. But from the constant vigilance, the constant choosing, the constant awareness of my own patterns and tendencies. Is it always going to be this hard? I asked Sarah over dinner. I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe it gets easier and then harder again. Maybe it's just always a practice, something you have to keep choosing. That's not very encouraging. Would you rather I lie and tell you it'll be effortless eventually? Yes, actually. A comforting lie sounds great right now. She laughed. Here's what I know. You're different than you were 2 weeks ago. Noticeably, measurably different. You're present more often than not. You're trying. You're aware. That's huge, Daniel. That's not nothing. It doesn't feel huge. It feels exhausting and small, and like I'm barely holding it together. That's because you're in the middle of it. But I'm watching from outside, and I'm telling you, you're changing, really changing. Not perfectly, not easily, but truly. That night, I had a dream. I was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down at the ocean far below. Behind me was a road, smooth and straight and clearly marked, leading back to everything familiar. But ahead was just the cliff and the ocean and the unknown. In the dream, I heard that voice again. Your tomorrow will not be as you imagine. I have already taken care of it. And in the dream, I jumped, not with certainty or confidence, but with trust. And as I fell, I didn't hit the water. Instead, I found myself flying. Not because I'd grown wings, but because the air itself was holding me, carrying me, supporting me in ways I couldn't have predicted or planned for. I woke up with that image still vivid in my mind. Flying not because I'd earned it or achieved it or figured out how to make it happen, but simply because I'd trusted enough to jump. Friday morning, I got to work early. Not because I was trying to get ahead or impress anyone, but because I'd woken up and felt like going in early. The office was quiet, only a few other early risers scattered around, and I made coffee and sat at my desk and just was. No urgent tasks, no crisis to manage. Just a quiet morning, a cup of coffee, and the sense that I was exactly where I needed to be. Marcus arrived around 8 and found me reading my book about Ulysses S. Grant. You're here early and reading a history book. Are you feeling okay? Better than okay. I had a dream last night about jumping off a cliff. That sounds terrible. It was actually good. I was flying, or being held by the air. I'm not sure which. He sat down, studying me with concern. Daniel, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to be honest. Are you actually okay, or are you having some kind of breakdown that looks like enlightenment? I thought about it seriously. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe both. Maybe you can't transform without breaking down first, but I know I'm better than I was 2 weeks ago. I know I'm more alive, more present, more connected to Sarah and to myself. So if that's a breakdown, I'll take it. Fair enough. Just promise me you're not going to quit your job and move to a monastery or something. I promise, though the monastery thing doesn't sound entirely terrible. We both laughed, and then Marcus headed to his desk, and I returned to my work. But his question stayed with me. Was I okay? Was this transformation real, or was I just replacing one form of dysfunction with another? I didn't have a definitive answer, but what I did have was this. I was trying. I was choosing differently. I was opening myself to possibilities beyond my control, and whether that was enlightenment or breakdown or both, it felt more authentic than anything I'd done in years. That evening, Sarah and I had our second Sunday check-in, even though it was Friday. We decided to do them more frequently, while the changes were still new, while the patterns weren't yet established. How present were you this week? Sarah asked. More present than before, but I caught myself slipping several times. Especially Wednesday, when a project got complicated and I wanted to control every variable. What did you try to control that you should have released? The project, my old patterns, the speed of my own transformation. I wanted to have it all figured out already, wanted to be the new Daniel perfectly, instead of just becoming him gradually. What brought you joy? Reading, cooking with you, the dream about flying. Small moments throughout the day when I remembered to be present instead of planning. Sarah's turn came, and she shared her own struggles with presence, her own tendency to try to control outcomes at work, her own moments of joy and frustration. It was vulnerable and honest, and exactly what we needed. When we finished, I felt that sense of accountability again, not judgment, just honest witness, someone seeing me, all of me, and staying anyway. Can I tell you something? I said. Always. I'm terrified that next week I'll wake up and this will all feel like a dream, that the old patterns will reassert themselves and I'll forget what this felt like, that I'll lose what I've found. Then we'll remind you. I'll remind you. Your Sunday check-ins will remind you. The book you're reading and the spontaneous road trips and the cooking together, all of it will remind you. You're not doing this alone, Daniel. You don't have to hold on to it all by yourself. Thank you, I said, and I meant it more deeply than 2 words could convey. That night before sleep, I prayed one more time. God, 1 week down. I made it through without completely falling apart or reverting to who I was. But I know that's just 1 week. I know there are so many more weeks ahead, so many more choices to make, so many more moments where I'll have to decide between control and trust. So I'm asking, don't let me forget. Don't let this become just a memory of a weird phase. Keep reminding me, keep showing up, keep taking care of tomorrow so I can focus on today. In the darkness, I felt that presence again. Steady, constant, holding. Tomorrow would not be as I imagined, but it would be exactly as it needed to be. And somehow, impossibly, I was starting to believe that was enough. 3 weeks had passed since that Sunday night when God had spoken to me. 3 weeks of choosing differently, falling back into old patterns, catching myself, choosing again. 3 weeks of learning that transformation wasn't a single dramatic moment, but 1,000 small decisions made over and over again. The sustainable investment project Robert had offered me was going well. I was working with clients who wanted their money to reflect their values. Environmental conservation, social justice, ethical business practices. It was slower work than my previous projects, less focused on maximizing returns and more focused on aligning wealth with purpose. And I found myself genuinely engaged with it in a way I hadn't been engaged with work in years, but today was different. Today was the day I'd been both anticipating and dreading. My parents were coming to visit. I hadn't told them about the promotion I'd turned down, Hadn't told them about the panic attack or the voice or the complete restructuring of my life's priorities. The last time we'd talked, a brief phone call 2 weeks ago, I'd kept things superficial, talking about work in vague terms, avoiding anything that might lead to deeper questions. My father was a retired engineer, a man who'd built his entire life on careful planning and rational decision-making. My mother was a former accountant who still balanced her checkbook to the penny and maintained spreadsheets for household expenses. They were good people, loving parents, but they'd raised me to value security and success above almost everything else. How was I supposed to explain to them that I'd chosen to step off the path they'd taught me to follow? Sarah sensed my anxiety as we cleaned the apartment Saturday morning, preparing for their arrival. "You're doing that thing again," she said, watching me rearrange the living room for the third time. "What thing?" "The control thing. You're trying to manage how this visit goes, plan out the conversations, anticipate all the difficult moments." I stopped mid-adjustment of a throw pillow and sat down heavily on the couch. "You're right. I'm terrified, Sarah. My dad is going to ask about my career. My mom is going to ask about our timeline for marriage and kids, and I have no good answers that won't disappoint them." "Then disappoint them. Easy for you to say. They're not your parents." She came and sat beside me, taking my hand. "Daniel, you can't live your life to meet their expectations. You tried that for 32 years and it nearly destroyed you. At some point, you have to choose your own path, even if it disappoints the people you love. I know, but knowing it and actually doing it are two different things. So what are you going to tell them?" "The truth, I guess, that I turned down a promotion. That I'm working on a smaller, less prestigious project because it's more meaningful. That I'm trying to learn how to live instead of just plan my life. And if they don't understand, then they don't understand. But at least I'll be honest. My parents arrived at noon. My father's car packed with the efficiency of someone who'd traveled frequently for work and knew exactly how to maximize trunk space. They looked good, healthy, energetic, the kind of people who'd planned well for retirement and were enjoying the fruits of decades of careful saving and investing. "Daniel!" My mother hugged me tightly. "You look thin. Are you eating enough?" "I'm eating fine, Mom." My father shook my hand firmly, then pulled me into a brief hug. "Good to see you, son. Sarah, you look lovely as always." We went inside, and my mother immediately started asking about the apartment, about our lives, about 1,000 small details that felt like she was cataloguing information for some internal assessment. My father settled into the armchair I'd positioned for him and looked around with the appraising eye of someone evaluating an investment property. "So," he said after the initial pleasantries were done, "tell me about work. Last we talked, you were working on that major client portfolio. How's that going?" This was it, the moment I'd been dreading. "Actually, I've moved to a different project, something new the firm is developing." "Oh, moving up to something bigger?" "Not exactly. It's actually a smaller project. Sustainable investment portfolios for clients who want to align their money with their values." My father's expression shifted subtly. Not disapproval exactly, but something close to it. "Smaller? Is that a lateral move?" "It's more of a different direction." My mother, always more direct, leaned forward. "What about that promotion you were being considered for? The senior analyst position? That was supposed to happen this quarter, wasn't it?" I felt Sarah's hand find mine, a silent support. "I was offered the position. I turned it down." The silence that followed felt like a physical weight. My mother's face went through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, concern. My father just stared at me like I'd told him I was joining the circus. "You turned down a promotion," my father finally said. "Why would you do that?" "Because I realized that climbing the ladder wasn't making me happy, because I was having panic attacks from stress, because I needed to make some fundamental changes in how I approach my life and career." "Panic attacks?" My mother's concern shifted to alarm. "Are you seeing a doctor? Are you on medication?" "Daniel, this is serious." "I'm seeing a therapist," I said, which wasn't exactly true yet, but I'd been meaning to make an appointment. "And I'm making changes. Better changes than medication could provide." My father stood up, starting to pace. his tell when he was upset but trying to stay calm. Let me understand this. You turned down a significant promotion, a 40% salary increase, a major career advancement because you were stressed? Because I was dying inside, Dad. Because I'd built a life that looked successful on paper but felt empty in reality. Because I needed to figure out what actually matters to me instead of just doing what I'm supposed to do. What actually matters? He turned to face me. Daniel, we raised you to be responsible, to work hard, to build a secure future. And now you're telling me you're throwing that away because you're having some kind of quarter-life crisis. I'm not throwing anything away. I still have my job. I'm still doing good work. I'm just choosing meaning over status, presence over planning, living my actual life instead of constantly preparing for some future that never arrives. My mother looked like she was about to cry. Did we do something wrong? Did we push you too hard? The question hit me harder than my father's anger, because the answer was complicated. They hadn't been cruel or abusive or even particularly demanding. They'd just taught me to value the wrong things, to measure success by external metrics instead of internal peace, to plan and control and optimize instead of trust and be present and simply live. No, Mum, you didn't do anything wrong. You taught me what you knew, what worked for you. But what worked for you isn't working for me, and I need to find my own way. Sarah spoke up then, her voice calm but firm. If I can say something, Daniel was barely living when you last visited 6 months ago. He was so stressed and anxious that he couldn't sleep, couldn't be present in our relationship, couldn't enjoy anything because he was always 10 steps ahead, always planning, always trying to control outcomes. The changes he's making aren't about throwing away his life. They're about saving it. My father looked at Sarah, then back at me, and something in his expression softened slightly. Is that true? Were things that bad? Yes, I said simply. I had a panic attack so severe I couldn't breathe, and in the middle of it, I heard from God, or whatever you want to call it, telling me that tomorrow is already taken care of, that I could stop trying to control everything. And I realized I had a choice. Keep going the way I was going and slowly destroy myself or make a radical change. God spoke to you. My mother's eyes widened. Daniel, we raised you with faith, but this sounds crazy? I know. Trust me, the rational part of my brain has been screaming that at me for 3 weeks. But something real happened, something I can't explain away. And following it has made me more alive, more present, more genuinely happy than I've been in years. My father sat back down, looking suddenly older. I don't understand this, any of this. We taught you to be rational, to make decisions based on facts and data, not feelings and mystical experiences. And I'm grateful for that, really. But Dad, you also taught me that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. My life wasn't working. My approach wasn't working. I needed to try something radically different. We sat in uncomfortable silence for a long moment. Then my mother spoke, her voice softer now. Are you happy? Truly happy? I'm happier than I've been in years. Scared sometimes, uncertain often, but genuinely deeply happier. And what about your future? Retirement savings, a family, all the things you need to plan for. I'm still planning for those things, Mom. I'm just not letting the planning consume my actual life. I'm holding it all more loosely, trusting that things will work out without me controlling every detail. My father rubbed his face with both hands, a gesture I recognized from my childhood when he was processing something difficult. I need to think about this. I need to understand what you're doing and why. That's fair, I said. But Daniel, he looked at me directly, and I saw concern in his eyes, not just disapproval. Promise me you're not making impulsive decisions. Promise me you're thinking through the consequences. I promise I'm being thoughtful, but I'm also accepting that I can't predict or control all the consequences, and that's the hardest part, learning to be okay with uncertainty. The rest of the afternoon was tense, but not hostile. We made lunch together, Sarah skillfully steering conversations toward neutral topics when things got too heavy. My parents told us about their retirement activities, their recent trip to Arizona, my younger sister's new job. We talked about everything except the elephant in the room, that their son had chosen a path they didn't understand and couldn't approve of. In the late afternoon, my father asked if we could take a walk, just the two of us. We walked to the same park where I'd sat reading during my first week back at work, and we sat on a bench overlooking a small pond. "Your mother is worried about you," he said finally. "I know. I'm worried too, but for different reasons." He was quiet for a moment, watching ducks paddle across the pond. "You know, when I was your age, I had a choice. I'd been offered a position at a smaller firm doing research I was passionate about. Better hours, more interesting work, but significantly less money and prestige than the corporate job I ended up taking. I didn't know that. I chose the corporate job because it was the responsible choice, because I had you and your sister to provide for, because security mattered more than passion, and I don't regret it. It gave us a good life, paid for your education, gave us a comfortable retirement. But sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I'd chosen differently, if I'd chosen passion over security, if I'd trusted that things would work out instead of trying to control every variable." I turned to look at him, seeing him differently, not just as my father, but as a person who'd also faced these choices, who'd also wrestled with what mattered. "When you turned down that promotion," he continued, "my first reaction was anger. You were throwing away what I'd worked so hard to give you, opportunities, security, a clear path to success. But then I started thinking about my own choices, my own roads not taken. And I realized I was angry because you were doing something I'd been too afraid to do. You're not angry anymore. Oh, I'm still uncomfortable with it, still worried about whether you're making the right choice. But I'm also—" He paused, searching for words, a little envious maybe. "That you figured out these questions at 32 instead of 65. That you're choosing life over security while you still have time to actually live it." We sat in silence, both of us watching the ducks and processing the weight of this conversation. "Can I ask you something?" I said finally. "Of course. Do you regret the choice you made, taking the corporate job instead of the research position?" He thought about it carefully. "I don't regret providing for my family. I don't regret giving you and your sister opportunities. But yes, there's a part of me that regrets not trusting enough to take the risk, not believing that passion and security could coexist, playing it safe when maybe I could have chosen something bigger. Is it too late? You're retired now. You could—" "No," he shook his head. "That ship has sailed. But you still have time to figure out how to build a life that's both responsible and passionate, both secure and meaningful. That's what you're trying to do, isn't it?" "I think so. I'm trying to stop treating life like a chess game, where I have to anticipate every move, and instead trust that there's a larger story being written, one I can participate in, but don't have to control." That sounds terrifying. It is, every single day, but it's also liberating in a way I never expected. We walked back to the apartment slowly, and something had shifted between us. Not complete understanding, not total approval, but a bridge of recognition. Two men at different stages of life, both wrestling with the same fundamental questions about control and trust, security and meaning. When we got back, my mother was helping Sarah prepare dinner. She looked up when we entered, searching our faces for clues about how the conversation had gone. "We're okay," my father said to her unspoken question. "Different perspectives, but okay." Dinner that evening was easier than lunch had been. We talked more freely, laughed more genuinely. My parents told stories from their early marriage, and I realized I'd never really heard these stories before, never taken the time to ask about their journey, their struggles, their own moments of doubt and decision. "You know," my mother said as we cleared the dishes, "when your father and I got married, we had nothing. No money, no clear career paths, no security. We had to trust that things would work out, and they did, but not because we controlled everything. They worked out because we held on to each other and took things one day at a time." "When did that change?" I asked. She paused, thinking. When you kids were born, I think. Suddenly we had people depending on us, and trust felt like irresponsibility. So we started planning everything, controlling everything, making sure nothing could go wrong. We thought we were being good parents. You were good parents, I said. You are good parents. You just taught me to value security so much that I forgot how to value life itself. And now you're trying to find the balance, she said, between security and spontaneity, between planning and presence. Exactly. She hugged me then, and I felt her trembling slightly. I'm still worried about you, but I'm also proud of you. It takes courage to change course, even when everyone thinks you're crazy. That evening, after my parents had gone to their hotel, Sarah and I sat on the couch, exhausted from the emotional intensity of the day. That was hard, I said, but you did it. You told them the truth, even knowing they might not understand. My dad told me something on our walk. He had a choice when he was my age, passion or security. He chose security, and he spent his whole life wondering what might have been different. That's sad. It is. But it also helps me understand why they reacted the way they did. They're not trying to control me. They're trying to protect me from regret. They just don't realize that the biggest regret would be not living authentically. We sat quietly for a while, and then Sarah said, I have something to tell you. Her tone made me nervous. What is it? I got a job offer in Seattle, a significant promotion, more money, leadership role in the company, everything I've been working toward. My heart dropped. Seattle was 2,000 miles away. When did this happen? The offer came last week. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you. Are you going to take it? She looked at me carefully. That depends. On what? On us. On whether we're actually building something together, or whether I'm just waiting around to see if you can maintain these changes, on whether you're willing to consider leaving Chicago, if that's what's best for both of us. The old Daniel would have panicked, would have started calculating all the implications, running through scenarios, trying to control and plan and figure out every variable. But I stopped myself, took a breath, and tried to be present with what she was actually saying. You want to take it, I said. I want to consider it, and I want us to consider it together as partners making a decision about our shared future instead of two individuals trying to align separate plans. When do you need to decide? 2 weeks. That's not much time. I know. But Daniel, this is exactly the kind of thing we've been talking about. Learning to make decisions together, learning to trust that the right path will become clear. Learning to hold plans loosely, instead of gripping them so tightly they suffocate us. She was right. This was a test, not of my commitment to change, but of whether the change was real, whether I could face uncertainty with trust instead of panic, whether I could participate in making a major life decision without trying to control every outcome. Okay, I said. Okay, what? Okay, let's consider it together. Let's talk about what we both want, what we're both scared of, what we both hope for, and let's make the decision together, trusting that whatever we choose will be the right choice because we're choosing it together. She looked at me with something like wonder. Who are you and what have you done with Daniel? I'm the guy who's learning to trust that tomorrow is already taken care of, even when tomorrow includes major life decisions that terrify me. Are you terrified? Absolutely. Completely. But I'm also excited because for the first time, I'm not trying to figure it all out in advance. I'm just going to be present with you in the process of deciding. We talked late into the night about Seattle, about careers, about what we each wanted from life, about the possibility of marriage, something we'd both been avoiding because it felt like just another item on a timeline to be managed, about children, about adventure, about building a life that was both responsible and spontaneous. And somewhere in the conversation, I realized something profound. For years, I'd been trying to plan a future that would make me happy. But happiness wasn't something that existed in the future, waiting for me to arrive at the right combination of circumstances. Happiness was something that existed right now, in this moment, in this conversation, in this connection with another person. Your tomorrow will not be as you imagine. I have already taken care of it. The words came back to me with new resonance. Tomorrow wouldn't be as I imagined, not because I was bad at imagining, but because tomorrow wasn't meant to be imagined. It was meant to be lived, experienced, discovered, participated in but not controlled. Before sleep that night, I prayed. God, I don't know what's happening with Seattle. I don't know if Sarah will take the job or turn it down. I don't know if we'll move or stay or what any of this means for our future. And the old me would be spiraling right now, running through every scenario, trying to plan for every possibility. But I'm trying to trust. Trying to believe that this is already taken care of, that the path will become clear, that I don't have to have it all figured out right now. Help me keep trusting. Help me stay present in the uncertainty instead of trying to escape it through planning. In the darkness, I felt that presence again. Not speaking, just there, holding, supporting, reminding me that I wasn't alone in this. That I'd never been alone in this, that all my planning and controlling had been unnecessary because something larger was already holding it all. Sunday morning, my parents came over for brunch before heading back home. The atmosphere was lighter than it had been yesterday, some of the tension released by honest conversation. As they were preparing to leave, my father pulled me aside one more time. "I've been thinking about what you said. About God speaking to you, about trusting instead of controlling, and I think maybe you're onto something, maybe the same thing I missed when I was your age, maybe the thing I'm still missing." He paused, struggling with words. "I'd like to hear more about it sometime, not to criticize or judge, just to understand." "I'd like that," I said, and I meant it. "And Daniel, whatever you decide about Seattle or about anything else, we're here. We may not always understand, but we're here." "Thank you, Dad." After they left, Sarah and I collapsed on the couch, exhausted but relieved. "That went better than expected," she said. "Much better. Though I think we opened some complicated conversations that are going to take years to fully work through." "That's okay, we have years." "Do we? What if you take the Seattle job and I can't come with you? What if—" She put a finger on my lips. "Stop. We're not doing that. We're not running through all the scenarios and possibilities. We're going to sit with this for a few days, pray about it, or meditate on it, or whatever you want to call it, and then we're going to make a decision together. Okay?" "Okay." And for the first time in my life, sitting with uncertainty felt less like torture and more like trust. Tomorrow would not be as I imagined, but that was exactly as it should be. The 2 weeks Sarah had to decide about Seattle stretched ahead like a test I hadn't studied for. Every instinct in me wanted to make spreadsheets comparing cost of living, research neighborhoods, calculate career trajectories, map out every possible scenario. Instead, I was trying to do something much harder, be present with the uncertainty while trusting that the right answer would emerge. We'd agreed to spend the first week just sitting with the question individually, not discussing it, not analyzing it, just letting it settle into our consciousness and seeing what surfaced. It was Sarah's idea, and it was torture. Monday morning at work, I found it almost impossible to concentrate. My mind kept drifting to Seattle, imagining what life would look like there, what I'd do for work, whether we get married before moving or after, whether this was the beginning of an adventure or the end of everything I'd been building. "You're doing it again," Marcus said, appearing at my desk with coffee. "Doing what?" "That thing where you're physically present but mentally somewhere else. Where are you right now? 5 years in the future? 10? Seattle, actually. Maybe. I don't know." He sat down, interested now. "What's in Seattle?" So I told him about Sarah's job offer, about the 2-week deadline, about trying to make this decision without falling back into my old patterns of control and over-analysis. "That's huge," he said when I finished. "Are you going to go with her?" "I don't know. We're trying to figure it out together." "But what do you want? Forget what makes sense or what's logical or what fits into some plan. What does your gut tell you?" It was a simple question, but I realized I had no idea how to answer it. What did I want? Not what should I want, not what made sense to want, but what did I actually, genuinely want? "I don't know," I admitted. I've spent so long focused on what I should do that I've lost touch with what I want to do. Then maybe that's what you need to figure out this week. Not whether Seattle makes sense, but whether it's what you actually want. After Marcus left, I sat with his question. What did I want? I pulled out a notebook, not to make lists or plans, but just to write freely, uncensored, whatever came to mind. I want to be with Sarah. I want to build a life with her. I want to stop being so afraid of the future that I can't enjoy the present. I want to work that matters. I want to live somewhere beautiful. I want community. I want adventure. I want stability. I want both somehow, even though they seem contradictory. I want to keep growing, keep changing, keep becoming someone who can actually live instead of just plan. I want to remember what God told me and not slip back into who I was. I want to be brave enough to choose trust over control, even when it terrifies me. Looking at what I'd written, I realized something. Most of what I wanted wasn't location-specific. It was about how I lived, not where I lived. Whether we stayed in Chicago or moved to Seattle, the real question was, could I keep choosing presence over control? Could I keep trusting that tomorrow was already taken care of? That evening, Sarah came home energized from work, talking about a presentation she'd given that had gone well. We made dinner together. It was becoming our ritual, this cooking side by side, creating something together without a recipe or plan. And I watched her moving around the kitchen, animated and alive, and I thought about how much I loved her. "Can I ask you something?" I said as we ate. "Always. The job in Seattle, is it something you actually want, or is it something you think you should want because it's a promotion and more money and advancement?" She set down her fork, considering the question. "That's a good question, and I'm not sure I know the answer yet. Part of me is excited about the opportunity, but another part of me wonders if I'm just chasing the next rung on the ladder, because that's what I've been taught to do, like I was doing, exactly like you were doing. And watching your transformation has made me question my own assumptions about success and what I'm actually working toward. So maybe we're both trying to figure out the same thing. Not what we should do, but what we actually want to do. Maybe. But Daniel, there's something else I need to say." She took a breath. "If I turn down this job, I need it to be because it's genuinely not right for us. Not because you're afraid of change or afraid of disrupting your transformation. I need to know that if staying in Chicago is what we choose, it's because it's the right choice, not because you're too scared to leave." Her words stung, because there was truth in them. Was I resisting Seattle because it wasn't right, or because moving would be one more thing I couldn't control, one more leap into uncertainty? "That's fair," I said, and I promised to be honest with myself about that. To really examine whether my resistance is wisdom or just fear dressed up as wisdom. We talked more that evening, not making decisions, just exploring the territory together. What excited us about Seattle? What scared us? What would we miss about Chicago? What were we hoping to find or become or experience? The next day, I did something I hadn't done since that first Sunday. I went to the park at lunch and sat on the same bench where I'd met Frank, the retired lawyer who'd shared his story about choosing the wrong path. I didn't expect to see him again. It had been weeks, and our meeting had felt like one of those random intersections that happen once and never repeat. But as I sat there with my sandwich watching people pass by, I heard a familiar voice. "Daniel? I thought that was you." I looked up to see Frank standing there with his own lunch, smiling like we were old friends instead of two people who'd met once for 20 minutes. "Frank, I can't believe you're here. I come here every Tuesday for lunch. Creature of habit, even in retirement." He gestured to the bench. "Mind if I join you?" "Please." We sat together, and for a moment we just ate in comfortable silence, watching the city move around us. "You look different than you did last time," Frank said eventually. "Less burdened. Did you figure out your fork in the road?" I turned down the promotion, chose the invisible path over the visible one. "Good for you. How's it going?" "Hard. Wonderful. Terrifying. I'm learning that transformation isn't a single decision. It's 1,000 decisions made over and over again. but I'm different, fundamentally different than I was when we met. I can see that. There's a lightness to you now, still some tension, but a different quality to it. The tension is because my girlfriend got a job offer in Seattle. We have to decide whether to move or stay, and I'm trying to make the decision without falling back into my old patterns of control and over-analysis. Frank nodded slowly. And that's hard, because you can't control the outcome, can't predict all the variables, can't ensure it's the right choice. Exactly. Can I tell you something I learned about making big decisions? He finished his sandwich and turned to face me more directly. The biggest mistake people make is trying to choose the path that guarantees the best outcome. But life doesn't work that way. There is no path that guarantees anything. Every choice leads to both opportunities and challenges, joys and sorrows, gains and losses. So how do you choose? You choose based on who you want to become, not what you want to have. You ask yourself, which path will help me grow into the person I'm meant to be? Which path will challenge me in ways that matter? Which path aligns with my values and my calling, not just my career or comfort? That's harder to quantify than a cost-benefit analysis. Much harder, but much more real. Because at the end of your life, you won't care about the cost-benefit analysis. You'll care about who you became and whether you lived authentically. We talked for another half hour, and Frank shared more of his own story, how he'd finally retired early, how he'd spent a year learning to be still, how he'd discovered that his calling wasn't to be a lawyer, but to be present with people, to listen deeply, to offer what wisdom he'd gained from his own mistakes. "You know what I do now?" he said as we prepared to leave. "I come to this park every Tuesday. I sit on this bench, and I wait to see who needs to talk. Some weeks it's nobody. Other weeks it's people like you, standing at a crossroads, needing someone to remind them that it's okay to choose the uncertain path. Is this your ministry? I suppose it is, though I never would have called it that before. I thought ministry was something that happened in churches with programs and committees. But real ministry is just showing up and being present when someone needs you." As we parted ways, Frank gave me his card again. The same plain white card with just a phone number and email. "Call me after you make your decision. I'd like to know how it turns out." That evening, I told Sarah about meeting Frank again, about his wisdom regarding making decisions based on who we wanted to become rather than what we wanted to have. "That's good," she said. "Really good. So who do you want to become?" I thought about it carefully. "I want to become someone who can be present, someone who trusts instead of controls, someone who chooses meaning over status, someone who loves well, someone who keeps growing and changing instead of calcifying into a fixed identity." "And can you become that person in Chicago?" "Yes, but I could also become that person in Seattle. The location isn't the point. The point is continuing to choose differently, continuing to trust, continuing to grow. So maybe the question isn't Chicago versus Seattle. Maybe it's about which choice represents growth and trust for both of us right now." We agreed to spend the weekend away from the decision entirely, to not talk about it, not think about it, not analyze it, just to be together and see what emerged from the silence. Saturday we drove out to Indiana Dunes, a national park on Lake Michigan we'd never visited, despite living an hour away for years. We hiked through forests and across massive sand dunes, eventually arriving at the beach, where the lake stretched to the horizon like an ocean. "It's beautiful," Sarah said, taking off her shoes to wade into the water. "I can't believe we've never come here." "I can? I never thought it was an efficient use of time. Never saw the value in driving an hour just to look at water and sand. And now? Now I see that the point is the beauty itself, the experience itself, being here with you, in this moment, with no agenda or purpose other than experiencing it." We spent hours there, walking the beach, sitting in the sand, talking about everything except Seattle, about childhood memories and dreams we'd forgotten and fears we'd never shared, about what made us laugh and what made us cry and what we'd learned about love and loss and being human. As the sun started to set, painting the sky in impossible colors, Sarah took my hand. "I've made my decision about Seattle," she said. My heart rate picked up. "And I'm going to turn it down." I felt a complicated rush of emotions. Relief, confusion, concern. "Are you sure? I don't want you to turn down an amazing opportunity because of me." "It's not because of you, it's because of us." Because I realized that what I want isn't a bigger title or more money or to live in a different city. What I want is to keep building something real with you, to keep having these moments, these conversations, these discoveries. And I can do that here just as well as I could do it there. But your career will be fine. There will be other opportunities. But this moment, this relationship, this person you're becoming and this person I'm becoming alongside you, this is what matters. This is what I want to choose. We sat there as the sun disappeared below the horizon, and I felt something shift inside me. Sarah had made her choice not out of fear or obligation, but out of clarity about what she actually wanted. And in doing so, she'd shown me something important. Sometimes the most radical choice isn't the one that looks biggest or boldest from the outside. Sometimes it's choosing to stay, to deepen, to invest in what you already have, instead of always chasing what you might have somewhere else. "I love you," I said. "I love you too. And Daniel, I want us to get married." The words hung in the air between us, both invitation and declaration. "Not because it's the next logical step," she continued, "not because it fits some timeline or makes sense on paper, but because I want to commit to this journey we're on together, to choosing each other every day, even when it's hard, to building a life based on trust and presence instead of control and planning." "Yes," I said, and the word came out with absolute certainty. "Yes, I want that too. I want to marry you. I want to commit to this, to us, to whatever comes next." See, we kissed there on the beach as the last light faded, and it felt like sealing something that had been building for weeks, a promise not just to each other, but to a new way of living, a new way of being, a new way of trusting that tomorrow was already taken care of. Sunday evening we had our weekly check-in, but this time it felt different, more like a celebration than an accountability session. "How present were you this week?" Sarah asked. "More present than ever. Especially this weekend. I felt like I was finally learning to be in my actual life instead of planning for some future version of it." "What did you try to control that you should have released?" "The Seattle decision. I kept wanting to analyze it, create scenarios, figure out the right answer, but I had to release it and trust that clarity would come without me forcing it." "What brought you joy?" "This weekend. The beach. You saying yes to staying. You asking me to marry you. All of it." Sarah's turn revealed similar experiences, the struggle to release control, the joy of clarity, the peace of making a decision based on desire rather than obligation. When we finished, I felt something profound. We weren't just checking in on our progress, we were witnessing each other's transformation. We were holding each other accountable, not to perfection, but to continued growth, to continued choosing, to continued trust. That night, I prayed with a different kind of gratitude than I'd felt before. "God, a month ago I was on my bedroom floor, gasping for air, desperate for relief from the anxiety that was consuming me. And you spoke those 7 words that started to change everything. Your tomorrow will not be as you imagine. I have already taken care of it." This week, those words were tested in a real way. We had to make a big decision, had to choose a path without being able to see where it led. And you were right. Tomorrow didn't look like I imagined. I thought Seattle would be the adventure, the leap of faith, the bold choice. But it turned out that staying was the leap of faith, that committing to what we already have was more radical than chasing something new. Thank you for teaching me that trust isn't always about jumping off cliffs. Sometimes it's about standing firm. Sometimes it's about choosing depth over novelty. Sometimes it's about recognizing that the life I have is already the life I've been looking for. Help me keep learning, keep growing, keep trusting, keep choosing presence over control, trust over planning, love over fear. and help me never forget that tomorrow is already taken care of, so I can focus on living today well. Monday morning, Sarah called the company in Seattle and declined the offer. They were disappointed but understanding, and they told her there might be other opportunities in the future if she changed her mind. She thanked them graciously and hung up with a sense of peace rather than regret. I called Frank and told him about our decision. "You chose to stay," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "We did. It wasn't the choice I expected to make, but it was the right one. The right choices rarely are the expected ones. That's how you know they're coming from wisdom rather than habit. Thank you, Frank, for that day in the park, for reminding me that invisible paths exist and that it's okay to choose them. Thank you for letting an old man share his regrets in hopes they'd help you avoid the same ones. And Daniel, call me sometime. Let's have coffee. I'd like to hear how your story continues." I promised I would, and I meant it. That week at work, Robert called me into his office again. "I heard through the grapevine that Sarah turned down a job in Seattle," he said. "She did. We decided to stay in Chicago." "And that was the right choice for both of you?" "It was. Not the easy choice, not the obvious choice, but the right one." He nodded thoughtfully. "You know, watching you these past few weeks has been interesting. You turned down a promotion that would have advanced your career significantly. You took on a smaller project that most people would see as a step backward. You made a major life decision based on what you actually wanted, rather than what looked good on paper, and somehow you seem happier and more grounded than you've ever been." "I am. It's made me think about my own choices, my own path, whether I'm still climbing ladders I don't actually want to be on." "What did you decide?" "I haven't yet, but I'm thinking about it, really thinking about it. Maybe for the first time in 20 years. We talked for a while longer, and I realized that my transformation was having ripples beyond just my own life. Robert was questioning his choices. Marcus was watching and wondering. Sarah was making different decisions. My parents were starting difficult conversations. Frank was finding renewed purpose in his park ministry. Sometimes when you change your life, you don't just change yourself. You change the people around you by showing them that change is possible, that different paths exist, that the visible roads aren't the only ones worth traveling. Thursday evening, Sarah and I went to a small jewelry store downtown. We decided to pick out engagement rings together, not expensive ones, not the kind I would have bought a month ago to signal status and success, but simple bands that meant something to us. The jeweler was an older woman with kind eyes who listened to our story, the abbreviated version, and then showed us rings that fit what we were looking for. Not impressive, but meaningful. Not flashy, but real. "You two remind me of my husband and myself 40 years ago," she said, as we tried on different options. "So in love, so committed to doing things your own way, instead of following some script." "How did it turn out?" Sarah asked. "Doing things your own way. Better than we could have imagined. Harder too sometimes, but better because it was ours. Our life, our choices, our adventure, not someone else's idea of what our life should be. We left with simple silver bands, nothing fancy, nothing that would make a statement to anyone except each other. And as we walked out into the cool evening air, engaged now, committed to this journey together, I felt something I'd been chasing my whole life without knowing it. Contentment. Not the false contentment of having everything figured out, not the temporary contentment of achieving a goal, but deep, abiding contentment with who I was, where I was, what I was building. Contentment with the uncertainty, with the impossibility of controlling outcomes, with the wild, beautiful terror of being alive and present and open to whatever came next. Your tomorrow will not be as you imagine. I have already taken care of it. The words had become a mantra now, a reminder, a touchstone. Whenever I felt myself slipping back into control and planning, whenever anxiety tried to creep back in, whenever the future seemed too uncertain and I wanted to grip it tighter, I'd remember those words. Tomorrow would not be as I imagined. It would be better or worse or different, but definitely not as I imagined. And that was okay. That was good. That was exactly how it should be. Because a God big enough to take care of tomorrow was a God I could trust to write a better story than any I could plan. And that trust, that terrifying, liberating, transformative trust, was teaching me how to finally, actually, genuinely live. 3 months had passed since that Sunday night when God spoke to me. 3 months since those 7 words, "Your tomorrow will not be as you imagine." I have already taken care of it, had cracked open my carefully controlled life and set me on a path I never could have predicted or planned. It was Saturday morning, and Sarah and I were getting married, not in the way I would have planned 3 months ago. Not the elaborate wedding with a year of preparation and a detailed timeline and contingency plans for every possible mishap. Not the expensive venue or the massive guest list or the perfectly orchestrated event that would signal to everyone that we'd achieved another milestone of success. Instead, we were getting married in the park where I'd met Frank, the same park where I'd learned about invisible paths and visible roads, where I'd sat reading during my lunch breaks, learning to be present, where I'd wrestled with the Seattle decision and discovered that sometimes staying was more radical than leaving. It was just us and 20 people, close friends, family, Marcus and Robert from work, Frank, who'd agreed to officiate since he was ordained from his years as a church elder before becoming a lawyer, Sarah's parents, my parents, who'd slowly come to understand and even celebrate the changes in my life, a handful of friends we'd reconnected with after years of my obsessive schedule keeping had caused us to drift apart. The ceremony was simple. No wedding planner, no elaborate decorations, no scripted vows we'd memorized and rehearsed. Just 2 people making promises to each other under an October sky, surrounded by people who loved us. As I stood there waiting for Sarah to walk toward me, not down an aisle with flower girls and groomsmen, just across the grass from where she'd been standing with her mother, I thought about how different I was from the person I'd been 12 weeks ago. That Daniel would have been anxious about every detail, would have had a backup plan for rain, a contingency for if someone was late, a mental checklist of everything that needed to happen and when. That Daniel would have been so focused on managing the event that he'd miss the experience itself. This Daniel, the one emerging from 3 months of daily choices to trust instead of control, was just present, feeling the cool autumn air, watching the leaves fall from the trees, seeing Sarah in her simple white dress, no veil, no train, just her with flowers in her hair and joy on her face. Being here, in this moment, without trying to fast forward to the next one or rewind to check if everything was going according to plan. Sarah reached me, took my hands, and smiled. "Hi, hi," I said back, and we both laughed at the beautiful ordinariness of it. Frank began speaking, but I barely heard his words. I was too focused on Sarah, on her eyes, on the way the light caught her hair, on the feel of her hands in mine. Present, fully, completely present. "Daniel has asked to say a few words," Frank said, and I realized it was time for the vows we'd each written. I took a breath and spoke from my heart. No notes, no rehearsal. "Sarah, 3 months ago I was drowning in plans and anxiety and the constant need to control everything. I was dying inside while looking successful on the outside, and I didn't even know it until I couldn't breathe anymore. And in the middle of that panic, God spoke to me, told me that tomorrow wasn't going to be what I imagined, but that He'd already taken care of it, that I could stop trying to control everything, that I could trust. You've been patient with me as I've learned what that means, as I've stumbled and fallen back into old patterns and had to choose again and again and again to trust instead of control. You've held me accountable without being controlling. You've celebrated my progress without letting me become complacent. You've loved me while I've been becoming someone new. So today, I'm promising you this. I will keep choosing presence over planning. I will keep choosing trust over control. I will keep choosing to be here with you, in whatever moment we're in, instead of always living 10 steps ahead. I will fail at this sometimes, probably often, but I will keep choosing it anyway. I promise to see you as a person, not as a variable in my equations, to honor your dreams even when they conflict with mine, to make decisions with you instead of for you, to hold our plans loosely and our love tightly. And I promise to keep listening for that voice that spoke to me, that presence that's teaching me how to actually live, to keep trusting that tomorrow is already taken care of, so I can focus on loving you well today. There were tears on Sarah's face, and on mine, and on several faces in our small circle of witnesses. Sarah spoke her own vows, about choosing to stay when she'd been planning to leave, about watching me transform and being inspired to question her own assumptions about success and achievement, about wanting to build a life based on presence and meaning instead of status and accomplishment. Frank pronounced us married, and we kissed, and our 20 witnesses cheered, and it was perfect precisely because it wasn't perfect. Someone's phone rang during the ceremony. A dog ran through our circle at one point, unleashed and joyful. The wind blew Sarah's hair across her face during her vows, and she had to pause to push it back. And none of it mattered. None of the small imperfections that the old Daniel would have obsessed over mattered at all. What mattered was the love, the commitment, the choice we were making together to build something real instead of something impressive. We had a reception in a nearby community center, not catered but potluck, with everyone bringing something. My mother had made her famous lasagna. Sarah's father had brought wine from a local vineyard. Marcus had ordered pizza because he'd forgotten he was supposed to bring something until that morning. It was chaotic and imperfect and full of love and laughter. During the reception, my father pulled me aside. "I need to tell you something," he said, and his voice was thick with emotion. "What is it, Dad?" "Watching you these past 3 months, seeing you change, seeing you choose differently, it's made me realize how much of my own life I've wasted on things that don't matter, on chasing security and status and approval instead of actually living." "Dad, let me finish. I'm 70 years old, Daniel. I don't have decades ahead of me to make changes the way you do, but I have some time. And your mother and I have decided to make some changes of our own." What kind of changes?" "We're selling the house, the big house we've lived in for 40 years, the one we kept even after you kids moved out because it was a good investment and showed we'd made it. We're moving to a smaller place, something more manageable, less focused on impressing anyone, and we're going to spend more time actually living, traveling, volunteering, being present with each other instead of just existing side by side." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Dad, that's amazing. You did this. You showed us it was possible, that it's never too late to choose differently." He pulled me into a hug, longer and tighter than any hug I could remember from my childhood. "Thank you, son. Thank you for being brave enough to change, even when we didn't understand, even when we were disappointed." Later, Frank found me standing alone for a moment, watching Sarah laugh with her friends. "She's wonderful," he said. "She is. I'm incredibly lucky." "Not luck, choice. You chose to become someone worth staying for. That's not luck, that's hard work." We stood together in comfortable silence, and then Frank said, "I want to tell you something. That day we met in the park. I wasn't there by accident." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'd been praying that morning, asking God if there was anyone who needed to hear my story, who needed to know that it was okay to choose the invisible path. And then you showed up sitting on that bench, looking exactly like I'd looked 30 years ago when I was making my own choice, conflicted, desperate, on the edge of something. You think God brought us together. I think God has been orchestrating this whole thing from the beginning. Your panic attack, the voice you heard, me being in that park, Sarah's job offer, all of it. Not controlling it, that's not how God works, but weaving it together, taking care of tomorrow in ways you couldn't see or predict." I thought about that, about all the moments over the past 3 months that had seemed random, but had led exactly where I needed to go. The bookstore woman in Galena who'd recognized the scripture in my words, Robert's unexpected support and his own crisis of meaning, Marcus questioning his own ladder climbing, my father's transformation. Your tomorrow will not be as you imagine. I have already taken care of it. Not control, not manipulation, but care, orchestration, a larger story being written that I got to participate in but didn't have to manage. Thank you, I said to Frank, for being there that day, for sharing your story, for being willing to be used by God to help a stranger. That's what we're here for, he said simply. To be present when someone needs us, to offer what we've learned, to remind each other that invisible paths exist and that it's okay, more than okay, it's necessary, to choose them sometimes. As the reception continued, I found moments to talk with almost everyone there. With Marcus, who confessed he'd been thinking about his own relationship with work and success. With Robert, who shared that he'd decided to step back from his management role next year and focus on the parts of his job he actually enjoyed. With my mother, who told me about the volunteer work she was planning to do once they sold the house. Everyone, it seemed, had been touched by watching someone choose differently, by witnessing transformation in real time, by seeing that change was possible, that control wasn't necessary, that trust was learnable. Later that evening, after most people had left, and it was just Sarah and me and a handful of close friends cleaning up, I stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The sun was setting, painting the sky in oranges and purples and reds. I stood there watching it, not checking my phone, not thinking about tomorrow, just being present with the beauty of this moment. Sarah came and stood beside me, slipping her hand into mine. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. About how 3 months ago I couldn't have imagined this day, not just the wedding itself, but being present enough to actually experience it. Being free enough to just let it unfold without trying to control every detail. Are you glad we did it this way? Instead of the big traditional wedding you probably would have wanted before? This was better than anything I could have planned, because I was actually here for it, actually present, actually experiencing it instead of managing it. We stood in silence for a moment, and then Sarah said, "Can I tell you something?" "Always. I'm pregnant." And the words hung in the air between us, and I felt a rush of emotions. Joy, fear, excitement, panic, all of them happening at once. The old Daniel would have immediately started planning, would have pulled out his phone to create timelines and checklists and budgets, would have spent the rest of the evening calculating all the implications and adjustments and preparations needed. Instead, I just pulled Sarah close and held her. "That's amazing," I said. "Terrifying and amazing." "I know. I found out yesterday. I was going to wait to tell you, but I couldn't. I wanted you to know today, on our wedding day, that we're not just starting a marriage. We're starting a family. How do you feel about it? Scared, excited, completely unprepared, but also like it's exactly right, exactly what's supposed to happen, even though we weren't planning it. Tomorrow will not be as we imagine," I said softly. "No," she agreed. "It definitely won't, but it's already taken care of." We stood there as the sun finished setting, two people who'd just committed their lives to each other, now facing a future that included a child, a whole new person who would depend on us, who would need us, who would change everything about our lives. And I felt peace, not because I had it figured out, not because I knew what came next, but because I'd learned, over 3 months of daily practice, that I didn't need to have it figured out, that tomorrow was already taken care of, that my job wasn't to control the future, but to be present in the moment, trusting that each next step would become clear when I needed it to. That night, in the small apartment we'd be moving out of soon, too small for a baby, but we'd figure that out when we needed to, Sarah fell asleep with her head on my chest. I lay awake for a while, processing the day, the news, the enormity of everything that was changing. And I prayed. God, I don't even know where to start. 3 months ago, I was on my bedroom floor, gasping for air, trapped in a life I'd built but didn't want. And you spoke to me. 7 words that changed everything. Today I got married. Today I found out I'm going to be a father. Today I looked around at my life and realized I barely recognize it. It's so different from what I had 3 months ago, so different from what I would have planned or predicted or even dared to hope for. And it's terrifying. Being a husband, being a father, being someone who tries to live in trust instead of control, all of it is terrifying. I have no idea what I'm doing, no roadmap, no 5-year plan, no spreadsheet that tells me how to handle the thousands of decisions and challenges that are coming. But I'm starting to understand what you meant when you said tomorrow is already taken care of. You weren't promising that everything would be easy, or that I'd never struggle, or that I'd always know what to do. You were promising that I don't have to carry the weight of the future, that I can focus on today, on being present, on loving well, on choosing trust over and over again, and tomorrow will unfold as it needs to. So I'm asking you to keep teaching me, keep reminding me, keep showing me how to live in the present instead of trying to control the future. Help me be the husband Sarah needs. Help me be the father this child will need. Help me keep choosing trust even when, especially when, it terrifies me. And thank you. Thank you for that panic attack that forced me to finally listen. Thank you for speaking those 7 words. Thank you for Frank and Robert and Marcus and my parents and everyone who's been part of this transformation. Thank you for orchestrating all of it in ways I'm only beginning to see. Tomorrow will not be as I imagine. But I'm starting to trust that what you have planned is better than anything I could plan for myself. I felt that presence again, stronger than ever. Not speaking, just there, holding, supporting, loving, promising. Sarah stirred in her sleep, and I held her closer, feeling the weight and wonder of all that was to come. A child, a family, a life built on trust instead of control. A future I couldn't predict or manage or orchestrate. And that was okay. More than okay. That was exactly how it should be. 6 months later, I was sitting in a hospital room, holding my daughter for the first time. She was tiny and perfect and completely unpredictable, and I was in love with her in a way I hadn't known was possible. Sarah was exhausted but glowing, watching me hold our daughter with tears in her eyes. "She's perfect," I said. "She is. What should we name her?" We'd been discussing names for months, but hadn't settled on anything. And looking at her now, I knew. "Grace," I said. "Her name is Grace." "Why Grace?" "Because grace is what I've been learning about these past 9 months. Unearned favor, undeserved kindness, the gift of being loved and accepted and held, even when I don't have it all together. Even when I fail, even when I slip back into old patterns and have to choose again." Sarah smiled. "Grace, I love it." As I sat there holding Grace, I thought about everything that had changed since that Sunday night 9 months ago. How I'd gone from drowning in anxiety to learning to swim in uncertainty. How I'd turned down a promotion everyone thought I was crazy to refuse. How I'd chosen presence over planning, trust over control, meaning over status. How I'd gotten married in a park with 20 people instead of a hotel ballroom with 200. How I'd become a father without spending 9 months frantically preparing and planning and trying to control every variable. And I thought about those 7 words that had started it all. Your tomorrow will not be as you imagine. I have already taken care of it. Tomorrow hadn't been as I imagined, not even close. It had been better and harder and more surprising and more beautiful than anything I could have predicted or planned or controlled. And it was taken care of, not in the sense that everything was easy or that I never struggled, but in the sense that each day brought what I needed. Each challenge revealed resources I didn't know I had. Each moment of uncertainty was also a moment of trust, a moment of growth, a moment of learning to let go. Marcus visited later that day, bringing flowers and a teddy bear and his usual irreverent humor. "You're a dad," he said, looking at Grace with something like awe. "This is wild. 3 months ago you were turning down promotions and having spiritual crises, and now you're holding a whole human person who's depending on you." "I know. It's terrifying. But you're not freaking out. The old Daniel would be freaking out. The old Daniel would be creating spreadsheets for feeding schedules and sleep training protocols and developmental milestones. This Daniel is just being here, holding his daughter, trusting that we'll figure it out as we go. That's growth, man. Real growth. After Marcus left, Frank visited. He looked at Grace with the tender eyes of someone who'd raised 3 children of his own and lived long enough to understand what mattered. "She's beautiful," he said. "Congratulations. Thank you for everything. That day in the park, your wisdom, your willingness to share your story, it changed my life. You changed your own life. I just reminded you that it was possible." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "And now you get to raise this little one to understand something it took us decades to learn, that control is an illusion, that trust is strength, that presence is the only place where life actually happens. I hope I can teach her that. You will. Not through lectures or lessons, but through how you live, through the choices you make every day, through showing her that it's okay to be uncertain, okay to not have all the answers, okay to trust that tomorrow is already taken care of." That evening, when visiting hours were over and it was just Sarah and Grace and me, I held my daughter close and whispered to her, "Grace, you're 1 day old, and you have no idea what I'm saying. But someday, when you're old enough to understand, I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to tell you about the night your grandfather Daniel, me, was drowning in anxiety and couldn't breathe, about how God spoke 7 words that changed everything, about how I had to learn to trust instead of control, to be present instead of always living in the future, to choose meaning over status and love over fear. I'm going to tell you that transformation is possible, that you can change at any age, at any stage, that invisible paths exist alongside visible roads, and sometimes the invisible ones lead somewhere better. I'm going to tell you that tomorrow will not be as you imagine, and that's a promise, not a threat. That God, or whatever you end up calling that presence that's larger than yourself, is already taking care of tomorrow, so you can focus on living today well. And Grace, I promise you this. I will try every day to be present with you, to see you for who you are, not who I think you should be, to love you without trying to control you, to trust that you have your own path to walk, your own invisible roads to discover. I'll fail at this sometimes. I'll slip back into old patterns. I'll try to plan your life or manage your choices or protect you from uncertainty. But when I do, I'll catch myself. I'll choose differently. I'll remember that you're not a project to be optimized, but a person to be loved. Tomorrow won't be as I imagine for you either. And that's okay. That's good. That's exactly how it should be. Because the tomorrow God has planned for you is better than anything I could plan anyway. Sarah was watching me, tears streaming down her face. "That was beautiful," she whispered. "It's true, all of it. This whole journey, the panic attack, the transformation, you, Grace, all of it, it's been about learning that I don't have to be God in my own life, that I can trust, that tomorrow is already taken care of." We sat together in the quiet hospital room, the 3 of us, a family now, and I felt more peace, more contentment, more genuine joy than I'd felt in all my years of careful planning and anxious controlling. Because I'd finally learned what it meant to be alive. Not just to exist, not just to achieve, not just to survive, but to actually fully, presently live. Tomorrow would not be as I imagined, but God had already taken care of it, and that made all the difference.